Welcome to the Postmodern Art Podcast, a podcast dedicated to giving artists who are wowing the world over the platform they deserve. I'm your host, Aiden Ragland, and if you're listening to this to the day it releases, I sincerely hope that, at least in America, you had a very lovely Thanksgiving, spending good quality time with your family. If you're just, anywhere but the US, I hope you have a fantastic Thursday. But now as we get to the Black Friday that it is today, well, I figured one of the hot topic items would be some of the newest video games, and, well, for today's guest, I think he might know a thing or two about some of the hottest video games out there, or at least some of the icons of gaming. Today's guest is Charles Zembillas, a legendary character designer best known for his work with Jak and Daxter, Crash Bandicoot, and Spyro the Dragon, among others, as well as being the founder of the Animation Academy in Burbank, California. Charles is someone that I quickly discovered had a major hand in some of the biggest properties that we have today. I mean, the fact that we just had a huge celebration for Spyro the Dragon for 25 years out there, that alone should really let you know how important Charles' works is. So I wanted to make sure to bring him on, and knowing how big of a fan my producer Aiden Arts is, I couldn't help but bring him on as well. I mean, come on, this was a match made in heaven, regardless. Just a couple bits of heads up before we actually do get into the episode. I'm going to apologize if the audio quality sounds a bit weird. Normally I record these through Discord, but Discord was not playing nice with us when we were recording this, so we instead went to Zoom. My mic quality is going to be just a little bit different, but it shouldn't take away from the overall conversation. It was still a fantastic conversation, as you can probably tell with how long this episode is. And I sincerely hope you guys enjoy such insightful thoughts that Charles does have to give, because this was seriously one of the most in-depth conversations I've had with a guest about the years of experience he has had. I sincerely hope that's something that you guys take personal, close to heart as you listen to it. And of course, if you enjoyed Charles and want to support him, make sure you check him out in the links down in the description below, especially for the Animation Academy. The stuff that he's doing there is absolutely outstanding, and if you guys are looking to get into the animation industry yourself, maybe take an opportunity to see if the Animation Academy is something you could look into. Speaking of animation, if you want to support some of the future of animation, maybe you should consider checking out the Indiegogo for The Evil Little Thing. My co-showrunner of the podcast, Tipsy J. Hart, is putting together a fantastic independent animated adult horror comedy show that you guys should absolutely love and support today. Link to that Indiegogo will be in the description below. But now, without further ado, please enjoy the Postmodern Art Podcast. Okay, Charles, before we really get going, I must ask the icebreaker question of the podcast, if I may. Let's say you get to go to a desert island on your own accord. It's just you alone with your thoughts. You get to kick back, relax, breathe, get to truly enjoy yourself for a little bit. With accommodations, you're not stranded on an island. It's like a little personal Airbnb hotel paradise place more than anything else.
Okay.
To help make sure you don't go completely insane on your little personal paradise, you can bring one piece of media or one piece of art with you to help with whatever kind of headspace you want on this island. If given this opportunity, what would that one piece be?
I will tell you that the very first thing that popped in my head, I don't know why, but the very first thing that popped in my head was What's Going On by Marvin Gaye.
Oh, okay. Okay.
His album. That popped in my head. I don't know why. So that's my visceral response right there, was to have Marvin Gaye's What's Going On.
I mean, to be fair, that is a really good album to like pick and like have with like a good mood with wherever setting you're in, you know?
Right. As far as art is concerned, man, that's a tough one. I would have to look at something that would be inspiring to me.
Okay.
And something that would be inspiring. I really can't. You caught me with that.
I was gonna say. To be fair, whenever you said like Marvin Gaye's "Let's Get It On," I mean, I consider that art, so you could consider that as like the 2-in-1 answer.
Let's Get It On is from a different album. This was
Oh,
from 1971. It was
Oh,
his
sorry.
master.
Oh, oh, okay.
What's going on? It's what's
Yeah.
going on. Marvin Gaye, like what's going on? You know, mercy, mercy,
Mhm.
all that stuff. It was really prophetic. Uh, it was something prophetic because everything that he was talking about, in many ways, actually, you know, came about. He talks about environmental issues. He talks about, he has concern for the children. It was a time of really great change that was happening in many areas of society. And
Absolutely.
plus, the music is just really good to listen to, you know.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
but that's what popped into my head. So, you know,
Okay.
as far as art is concerned, it would have to be something I think from the great masters.
Okay.
I just don't know what, you know. I just don't know what.
I mean, to be
I would have
fair,
to say. I would have to say one of the great experiences of my life was I was at the Sistine Chapel,
okay.
and everybody who was there at the time at the Sistine Chapel were all for some reason they were all like close to the walls, and the only open area where I wasn't like where I could like reach, spread my arms out and not really come in contact with anybody was right in the middle, and it was where God is touching the hand that just about to touch the finger of Adam.
Right.
And it was right above me, and I was looking up, and I was like one of these like, like this is my moment. This is my moment in time and space at this very place. And I stood there for about 20 minutes, just soaking it in. So I would have to say maybe that would be something that I would like to have with me because it reminds me of that particular moment. Okay, so Marvin Gaye, What's Going On, his album, and the center of the Sistine Chapel, where God is creating Adam. So there you go.
That I just gotta say that experience you talk about was so beautiful and so poetic. Although I think it'd be funny to try to see how we could get the center of Sistine Chapel away from the Sistine Chapel and with you on this island.
Well, I'll tell you something I learned about that.
Oh,
And that's because there was a big controversy going on in the 80s with the Sistine Chapel because
okay.
they wanted to clean it. And
Okay.
they thought that Michelangelo at that time, and when he did it, purposely put on some sort of like a patina on it, like a tint on it, to give it like a more
Mm-hmm.
earth tone to the colors. But when actually it was just layers of like grime and soot and all that kind of stuff that had built up over the centuries. And when they did clean it off, they found that it exploded with color, just absolutely vibrant color.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that when I was at the Sistine Chapel, and then as a result of that, I was going through the Vatican Museum, was that that's what he intended to do, because the Sistine Chapel was the beginning. It was the beginning of a trend, and I realized that when I was going through these other areas of the museum, that there were paintings on the ceilings everywhere. There was just and they were all like post Sistine Chapel, and they were all
Okay.
full of color. So if Michelangelo was putting some sort of a grayed down tint on the Sistine Chapel, we would have seen it in subsequent works that other people were doing, and I didn't see that at all. So what
Okay.
I learned from that was that he painted it with really really bright colors, and that it wasn't intentional that he put a tint over that. So that was a consequence. One of the things that I learned as a result of going to the Sistine Chapel. So
It's amazing. That I didn't even realize that, but you learn something new every day, right?
yeah.
But with that, I cannot think of a better way to start the Postmodern Art Podcast. Welcome, everyone. I am your host, Nathan Ragland. I am also not the only host for today. Aiden, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Hello, I am Aiden. I was a previous guest, now a producer on the Postmodern Art Podcast, and I am very excited to be here. I have been nervous about this for weeks.
Well, let's talk about why we are getting nervous. But before, just a little housekeeping, obviously, feel free to like, share, subscribe, follow whatever audio streaming platform you prefer. The Indiegogo for the Evil Little Thing is still going on. Please check the link in the description below. And follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, wherever on social media at Postmod Art Pod for future updates and guest announcements, including today's guest. He is a legendary character designer, best known for his work with Jak and Daxter, Crash Bandicoot, and Spyro the Dragon, as well as the founder of the Animation Academy in Burbank, California, influencing animators of today and tomorrow. Majestic beast and all, majestic beard and all, I should say. Welcome to the podcast, Charles Zembillas.
Thank you, and I appreciate that you pronounced my last name correctly.
So. I was glad that I decided to do a little research beforehand and go through old videos of the Animation Academy to where you clearly remembered you clearly said your last name, because literally the week leading up to this I was debating, like, is it Zembillas or is it Zembillas? Like, I needed to make sure, so I did my research and I realized it's Zembillas, but thanks. There you go. How are you doing today, Charles?
I'm doing great, thank you very much.
Well, thank you. We're doing wonderful. I mean, I cannot tell you enough how excited me and Aiden were to have you on this podcast. Obviously, like I said before, although I don't know if that audio is included, but the influence you kind of had on us in more than one way and kind of the influence that you have in the industry is absolutely outstanding. And I wanted to make sure to give that little spotlight to you more than anything else. But before really divulge you to the stuff you're doing then and now, let's go back a little bit further. I want to know more or less the origin story of Charles. What got you interested in art and animation and stuff in the first place?
Well, it started very early in my life. And there were some things, my life was, I was very fortunate because I had a very happy childhood.
Okay.
My childhood was happy. And a big part of that was because of, I think, what was happening culturally in America. Because my first exposure to animation, of course, was on TV. And I remember that the local TV station where I was growing up, at 6 o'clock every evening, played, every time for 6 o'clock at night, they always played cartoons, and everybody in the neighborhood stopped. We stopped what we were doing. We all went home, or everybody. I remember like a large group of kids and sitting on the living room of my home, and we would watch on Monday nights. It would be Huckleberry Hound. Yes. On Tuesday nights it would be Yogi Bear. On Wednesdays and Fridays it would be Rocky and Bullwinkle, and on Thursdays it would be Woody Woodpecker. And I was just enamored with that, and I'd always saw like Hanna-Barbera at the end of the credits and stuff, whatever. And I kept reading it Hanna-Barbera, and that just like stuck in my head. And years later, when I found out the proper way of pronouncing the name, I was just kind of, and I actually had the opportunity many years later when I was an adult to actually meet Joe Barbera one-on-one. I had a really, really interesting meeting with him at one time in my life. And maybe we'll get to that later on tonight, but that was one thing, okay? And then I remember Astro Boy. Ooh. I remember Astro Boy. And I was really caught up with Astro Boy, and I was really caught up with drawing the characters. I was like extremely interested in like Woody Woodpecker's beak and Astro Boy's like headgear or whatever you want to call that. And I started drawing that, I just wanted to kind of like emulate that. And it was just this thing where I was just like into, like trying to figure out how those shapes work. And I was also started drawing at also when relatives would come over to our house to visit us, they'd always bring coloring books. And I had this knack as a small child of being able to color better than anybody else, like better than the rest of my siblings. I had we had a lot of kids in our family, and I could color between the lines. I could color really evenly. And then that kind of like morphed into when I was in grade school. I would draw like kindergarten, first grade, that thing. I would draw, like people with bodies and arms and legs. And my teachers started to notice that. And they started to bring that attention that I had this particular gift to my parents. And that went on to our our extended family and stuff. And I come from it was very ethnic back then. It still is, but back then I was just I remember my relatives coming up to me and saying, that this is a gift from God, and that I had this feeling like I was obligated to do something with it. And that's how it started to roll. And then one time, the first time when I never really got a chance to go to movies when I was a child. I can remember going to movies maybe 2 times when I was a really small child. And the second time I went to the movies, it was to see Pinocchio. And this was a time when of course, there were no video recorders. There were no, if you wanted to see a movie, if you want to see a Disney movie, a Disney feature animated film, you had to either see it when it was at the theaters, or you had to wait 7 years for it to be released again. So this was the time when Pinocchio came out. And I went to the movies as a kid. I didn't know what to expect. And I saw Pinocchio, and I was just absolutely awestruck by it. I was awestruck by it. I remember as a child thinking, how can human beings do something like this? And I remember vividly, the Monstro the whale, and other things like Pinocchio turning into a donkey, and all that kind of stuff. It was just, and it was years later, maybe 20 years later, or thereabouts, when I had an actual chance to see it again. Because at this time I was working at Hallmark, Hallmark Arts in Kansas City, and they had this thing where they had this deal with Disney where they would, like every couple months, everybody would have it. They had a small theater there, and all the artists could go and see a Disney movie that was on that they let Hallmark screen. And that's when I saw Pinocchio, and that's when that was all those years later. I saw it again, and that's when I realized how brilliant the thing was. And I just felt like the greatest artist in the world, without question. This is how I felt as a child. The greatest artist in the world, without question, go work in animation. And if Leonardo da Vinci and all the other great masters were around in our day and age, that they would be working there too.
I can imagine.
That's how all that, just roll all that up together, and that's how I started to. That's how I migrated to, and that's like set the path for the rest of my life.
I mean, to be fair, just that little bit alone, like the story you just weave through there, like you've got some of the biggest influences, some of the best, like especially of that era, some of the best cartoons and influence of animation, like really weaved into your DNA, like that.
Yeah.
I can only some people could probably only dream of having influence like that these days. Like that is incredible.
I was very much influenced by the great masters of the Renaissance too. I was very much influenced, like any kind of art that I was exposed to. I did a lot of paint by number sets and stuff. I would like do all the kind of stuff. And I remember one time, I think I was in the 4th grade, and I must have been, I'm guessing 9 years old. And we had like a break, like you take a break in the afternoon to draw and stuff. And they came out, those boxes of really fat crayons and newsprint and all that. And so they gave us a half hour or so to draw and stuff. And I was getting in there, and I was drawing the Lone Ranger and Tonto, which are American, I don't know if you're familiar with them internationally, but the Lone Ranger was like a big thing, big Western superhero of sorts, And I remember drawing the Lone Ranger and Tonto on their horses, like really dramatically. Like it was very crude because I was a child, but I drew the desert and all that stuff. There's a scene behind them, and this girl was watching me. She was watching all this activity I was doing. Then she stood up and looked over my shoulder, and she screams, "God, is that good?" And the entire class just came and swarmed around me to see what I was doing. And all of a sudden, I was the center of attention. And I'm looking around, I'm saying, like, because I was a small little kid, Billy was on me all the time and everything like that. And this time I realized I was the center of attention. Like this was something I could do that was better than everybody else. So I went home that day, and I went to my mother and I said, "Mom, I know what I'm going to be when I grow up." And she goes, "What is it?" She goes, "What is it, son?" And I said, "I want to be an artist." And she goes, "Oh, that's nice." And patted me on the head, and then that's when I made up my mind. I never really kind of deviated from that. I just said I'm going to be an artist when I grow up, and that's what happened. So that's the story of my childhood.
That's certainly quite the story starting out more than anything else. Like I assume it was around that point to where, like you said, it kind of just at that moment, like especially that young, that's when it went from just like a general love for animation and stuff to just a passion and wanting to make it your career, right?
Mm, no,
No,
I
okay,
didn't know because I thought that it was unachievable for me. I
okay,
thought it was unachievable. I thought it was like so far beyond what I was able to do. That wasn't really something that I saw as something that I would actually be able to achieve. I remember creating characters, and I would
okay.
create characters when I was a child. And I remember Saturday morning cartoons were just absolutely fantastic back then. I mean, we just we couldn't wait to get up in the morning and watch all the cartoons that were coming out. And there was, and there was cartoons on prime time. And we had the Flintstones, we had the Jetsons, there was Top Cat, Johnny Quest, all these really great shows, and they were all different. They were all like so much fun. And then Saturday morning car comes around, you have like man, let me see if I can remember some of them. Like Adamant, and
Oh,
Space Ghost, and Wacky Races, and Secret Squirrel, and all that stuff. And it was fabulous. It was an absolutely fabulous time to be growing up. And I feel very fortunate because I feel like I grew up during I know that I grew up during a golden era, in many ways. And it never left me. I just, it was just so much fun. It just never left me. So, and I wound up, years later, it was when I was in Kansas City, when I was working at Hallmark, and I read a book, but influence animation was a tremendous influence on me. I mean, not just as far as just the. I hope you got a lot of time.
I got plenty of time. Trust me.
Because let me tell you some stories.
I was like, the only thing I'm concerned about is the remaining meeting time that it says at the top, which I might have to upgrade to Pro just to make sure that we don't have that issue. But
okay, well, it's gonna cut off at 45 minutes. So, but
okay, so I probably
this
will
is going to go a lot longer. So I would say, if it does, I have Zoom. I could send you an invitation to Zoom, and I could set it up on my end.
Okay, that honestly
Okay.
that would be great.
Okay, so here's what was happening when I was in Kansas City and I was working Hallmark, and that was an absolutely wonderful experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to explain something to you that this was something. No, I was in art. I was in Kansas City when I made my first like attempt to get into animation. But before
Okay.
that, I had gone to college for 4 years as an art major, and it didn't work out because I went to this particular college because in my high school there was this guy who was really, really good. He was better than me, and he went to this one particular college, and I thought he went there for art. So I followed him. He graduated a year before me, and when I got there, I found out that he was a business major, and he wasn't there for his art. But I had such a good time there. It was such a like a absolutely crazy, insane, hedonistic, time, that but I did a lot of art, but it was just like it wasn't professional. But it was good, but it was raw. And when I realized that I was taking my portfolio after I had graduated, and I was taking it all to these studios in Chicago, like design studios, illustration studios, and they were just telling me like, they were saying, sorry, kid, you gotta go back to school. You're not ready. You're not professional. So I thought about it, and after I had some experiences with people who were trying to recruit me for like selling vacuum cleaners door to door, and other things. That was like, I really just said to myself, like I'm going to give it one more shot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took my portfolio to, I made an appointment with the American Academy of Art in Chicago.
Okay.
I'm sure it's still a great school, but at that time, it was really, really an outstanding school. And I showed all that artwork that I had done in college, and I showed it to the president of the school, and he was considering having me skip the first year and going straight into some of these advanced classes like illustration and all that kind of stuff. And he recommended that I start from the beginning because he's the first one that told me, like, you're really, your work is you're talented, but you're raw. And I said, okay. And it was a very difficult time in my life. I'm telling you, man, it was just really, really, one of many episodes in my life where I was extremely challenged.
Mm-hmm.
And but I stuck with it. And that first year, in art school was tough because my fundamentals teacher, the way that the academy had it set up was they put an extraordinary emphasis on artistic fundamentals, which was unique at that time. So it was just, if you get their philosophy was, if you get your fundamentals down, then you can do anything with it. And that's what I needed. As opposed, they were in like an ideological battle of sorts with the Art Institute of Chicago, which they had a school which did a lot of like non-representational stuff and everything like that. So I went there, and the guy that I had as my fundamentals teacher was like a former drill sergeant from the Army.
Oh, lovely.
And he was really, really, he was a very great watercolor painter, but he was a really, really tough teacher. And man, did he make it tough for me, and it was just, like, but I stuck with it, and I got through fundamentals, and I was able to, and it changed me. And it's like, okay, now I understand what, like composition and design and perspective and all this kind of stuff. And then I went into illustration, and from the illustration program, a recruiter from Hallmark Cards came to the school at the end of my second year. I spent 2 years in art school, and he recruited me, and I was hired directly at Hallmark. And while I was at Hallmark, that was a great learning experience. But while I was in school, this is what I had a tremendous epiphany. And that was, at that time, the animation cells from Disney, from the great Disney films, were being released and sold. And there was a gallery across the street from the Art Institute of Chicago, which is a wonderful world-class museum. And I went to this gallery, and I said, would you kindly show me where the animation cell exhibit is? And they said, yeah, it was almost disrespectful, not the people that were telling me, it was just where they put it. It was all the way down the hall right in the back entrance and stuff. So I went down, there was this little white room with, like right before the back door. And I went in, and my jaw just hit the floor with a thud. And I saw these beautiful, the original animation cells from Pinocchio, and Snow White, and Sleeping Beauty, and Lady and the Tramp, and all this stuff. And it was there. This is it. I could see it. I was there. I was like, and I saw the beauty of the art, the simplicity, the simple colors, the colored line, all that stuff. And I went back to school, and I said to myself, I'm going to develop a completely new way of painting. Because everything back then was very editorial based, and there were these great illustrators that were doing like all these different, like pick out techniques and this and all that kind of stuff. And they would use something called a lucograph. And the lucograph was something that you had to pick a photo or something you had to reference, and then it projected it onto your painting surface, and you trace that and all that stuff. And I was very uncomfortable with that, because I just wanted to, I wanted to just draw my own stuff, and, without having to be reliant on reference.
Right.
So I developed this technique called the ultimate animation cell. And what it was is I started painting imaginative things, just imaginative, subjects from, that were character based, using this technique of flat colors and colored line. And it completely changed everything that was going on in the illustration program there, which was what they were known for primarily. They were a great school. Great artists came from that school. And that was and Hallmark picked up on that, and they hired me, and then I went on from there. And then when I was at Hallmark, I read a book called, it was just published, it was called The Illusion of Life, Disney Animation, The Illusion of Life by Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston. And I read the whole thing from cover to back, and it's a thick book. I read the whole thing and at the very beginning, they were talking about how Ron Miller, who was the president of Disney at the time, were looking for animation artists for artists who could animate in the Disney style. And I said, well, I'm hugely influenced by the Disney style. So what I did was I got a portfolio together, and I remember getting a blank sketchbook, and just, one of those nice black, like kind of pseudo leather cover ones. And I filled the whole thing up, and I would not go to sleep at night if I didn't have at least 3 pages done. And I would take it with me to work, and whenever I had a break, and when everybody wasn't looking, I'd draw on it. I took my portfolio and I sent it into Disney.
Okay.
And you have to understand something, that this was a different era. So we didn't have voicemail, we didn't have answering machines. It was nothing like that. And they got my portfolio and they kept calling me. I gave them my home number, but my home number, you know, they kept calling me, and I didn't know they were trying to contact me. So after about a month, I called them and I said, hey, you know, I sent my portfolio. I just was wondering if you got it, all that kind of stuff. And I told them, and they knew who I was. And they said, and they put me in touch with this fellow by the name of Don Hahn.
Okay.
And Don Hahn turned out to be one of Disney's big guns. He's like an executive producer there now. He's a legendary figure. But at that time, he was like, he was working as in some sort of administrative capacity, as a, you know, I mean, probably in recruiting or so, I don't really know. And he told me that they had been trying to get in touch with me and that they wanted me there in Burbank to start a training program. And I said, well, I can't make it. I mean, you know, there's like a couple feet of snow on the ground and I can't be there in a week. They wanted me there in a week. And I said, I'm employed at Hallmark. I can't just pick up and go. It would be, you know, inappropriate to give them such short notice and stuff. So they said, we made arrangements for me to start in the summer, that summer. And
Okay.
so I was just like, oh man, that was great. I made it into Disney. I made it into a training program at Disney. The thing that I thought I could never do, I was able to achieve, you know? And so when time went by and, you know, I gave my notice, gave my 2-week notice and I got everything ready. And I bought I didn't have a car. Cause you could just take the bus or walk wherever you wanted to go there and everything. So I just, I remember buying like a third-hand Honda Civic, a little Honda Civic. And I remember taking those garbage bag twisties to keep my front license plate on it because the bolts weren't there. And I remember packing up my portfolio and they shipped it back to me, by the way. So I took my portfolio, I packed up my portfolio, and I took some clothes and I took my art supplies. And this is a little hatchback thing. It's just a tiny little 4-cylinder car that had almost no power to it.
Right.
You know, it was tough, you know, like it was, I'll tell you about that later. And anyway, and I took a pot, like a little kettle, you know, to boil water. And what I did was I set out from Kansas City to drive out to California, and I was camping out on the way, you know. So I'd like find campsites where you pay like $2 or $3 for a night, and I would just pitch a tent that I borrowed from my friend, you know. And that's how I went out to California. And I remember I had a couple of I was taking a test for Don Bluth. I took a Don Bluth and I was going to hand deliver it when I got to LA. And I took the northern route to San Francisco, and then I went south. And I didn't, you know, this is a time before cell phones that nobody knew where I was. You know, they just knew, you know, I was out and just, you know, it was just, I was out there. And I finally got to Los Angeles. And when I got there right at the beginning of a major strike.
Oh.
So the whole animation industry was shut down. I mean, I got there like on the second or third day. And I remember there was like a hamburger place across the street from Disney. And I remember the one thing, though, that happened at Hallmark, I mean, they just really loved me. And I had a wonderful time there. I did, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And it was too fuzzy bunny for me, you know? And they wanted to, if I'd have stayed there, I'd have been a high-level executive. I can tell you that right now. They kept giving me raises every couple of months. They really, really liked me. They wanted me to stay. And they kept flying me to different business. I was like a business. When I first time in California was because Hallmark flew me out there. They flew me to, and I met, I was like a VIP with my supervisor. We went to Disney and we got like a sneak peek at Fox and the Hound, you know?
Oh, wow.
That's what we were working on. And then we went to the executive, we had a lunch in the executive lunchroom. And that's back when the executive lunchroom, when artists were in the executive lunchroom. Now it's just these corporate farts, you know? And the executives, so I saw Ken Anderson there, one of the great artists at Disney who like developed the concepts for concept sketches and story sketches for Jungle Book and a whole bunch of stuff, you know. And I was looking at all these great superstars, these great artists, and I'm sitting there and said, "That's him now. Look at this," you know. And I was so upset. And I met Stan Lee. We went to Marvel. I met Stan Lee, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I was like talking to Stan Lee, and I was just flooding him with just, oh man, I love Mario. I love Mario. I learned to draw because I was copying comics on. And he came back and he gave me like 6 books that he authored, a stack of 6 books that he personally autographed to me, including How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. Personally autographed to me by, and I started reading it because one of the things that Hallmark had me do as a result of that was design a superhero character for Hallmark,
Okay.
And I used this book to teach myself how to draw superheroes. And at that time, I was working on a Disney birthday party set, and I met a guy named Carson Van Osten, who was the Disney comic book artist at the time. He's passed away, but he was he was an expert on drawing Mickey Mouse. And he was teaching me how to draw Mickey Mouse and all this kind of stuff and everything. And I just had such a wonderful experience there. And, I wound up, like going to, like following this up and actually, I think it was like the next year or something. That's when I sent my portfolio. So I get to Burbank, and I'm at a hamburger place, and I dropped off my test to Don Bluth Studios, and there was nobody there, just a couple people. And I'm here I am having a hamburger across the street from Disney, and I'm seeing all these people on the picket lines, and I'm sitting there, and I'm homeless, and I just started laughing. I just remember laughing, like how absurd all this was, So I went out to the picket lines. I started asking guys, "What's this strike about?" and all that stuff. And I realized they're not too friendly, These guys are not. They're kind of snobby asses, man. I'm Midwestern friendly. Right. And here I am. I was like being exposed to the culture of Los Angeles, which is something different. And I was kind of like very perturbed by that. But anyway, I just kind of went with it and stuff. And I remember, like walking around striking with them. I didn't have a sign to hold, but it was just kind of, it was just kind of fun. And so that's how I got out there. That's how I got to California. I was just living in a tent. I was sleeping on the beach. I was sleeping in the desert, And then I found my way to San Diego.
Okay.
And because there was a lady there who used to work for Hallmark. And she was, I knew her. She had visited there, and I knew people who knew her at Hallmark. And I got to be, fairly good acquaintances, And one of the times they did send me and my supervisors to San Diego for a research trip there one year. And that's when I first met her face to face. And then she would visit Hallmark because she was still working for them. And she was a brilliant artist. Her name was Patricia Paris, by the way. Okay. She's a lovely, 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 lovely lady. Very, very super talented. The only artist that Hallmark ever hired right out of high school. That actually, at that time, 2 other people they hired out of high school. And I'll tell you about them later if you want to know, because they became really good friends of mine. And they actually got into animation too.
Okay.
I remembered how to get to her house. And you have to remember, I would look like a complete wild vagabond. My hair was long. I had these, I was just like, I've been, like living, out. I just looked like a beach bum, And I get with my little Honda, and I go up to her house, and I go up to her door, and I knock on her door, and then she answered the door, and I said hi, and she looks at me, and her eyes just popped open, and she literally says, "God sent you," and she grabbed me, and she pulled me inside, and she pushed me up the stairs into her studio, and she sat me down and says, "Get to work."
Oh, wow.
She was doing a project for SeaWorld. She was doing some big project for SeaWorld. She really needed help. So immediately I had like an interim job, and that's where I worked. And they had a guest house. They had a guest room in their house, and that's where I lived. And I did this for a couple months. And then through her, I met a fellow by the name of David Kirshner. Okay. And David Kirshner became he's the guy, through him, I went there, and took a trip to LA. I showed him my portfolio because he wanted to see it. And she was working on a project with him. And turns out it didn't go very well for her. I mean, it worked out fine, but there was some really funky stuff that went on with that whole situation. And I'm not going to get into it too much because I don't want to berate anybody personally, but it was one of the early exposures I had to Hollywood, and where I started to realize that this place needs a good kick in the ass sometimes. So anyway, I went to Hollywood. We went up to LA, and I showed him my work, and he pulled me to the side. He started talking about a project he wants to do and how much, like how much would I charge him for doing some concept sketches. And I said, well, I'll do it for $500. That was a lot of money back then. And he kept, I kept hearing from him, like periodically, like, when are you going to get to it? When are you going to get to it? I said, I'm busy. I finally had to leave San Diego because I heard that the strike broke, and I went up north to LA. And fortunately, I had some relations there who were, we were close, and they let me, because the weather was getting bad. And I remember camping out on the beach one day with these two gigantic concrete orbs.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what in the world they were. They looked like just two big, huge, monstrous boobs, And they had like little things on the top of them. They just looked like boobs. And I said, but the ants got into my tent and it started eating me up then. I said, and the weather was changing. I said, I can't keep doing this, So I went up north, and I said, it turned out to be a nuclear power plant. And I didn't know that, the San Onofre nuclear power plant. And that's when I had to realize I had to kind of, change my plan. So they let me stay. I slept on the living room of their home, and for a little while. And the very next day, I got on the phone. I started calling up any studio I could find. I called up Disney. The strike was over, but it changed the industry entirely. The industry was completely different. That I could not get in touch with Mr. Hahn. All of a sudden, I had these other corporate people that I was kind of, these secretaries and stuff that I was going through, and they were very kind of, mean and not very pleasant and rude, and so I kept calling up these different studios and stuff, and I got in touch with one guy who would actually stop and talk to me on the phone. And shame on me for not remembering his name, but he was a good fellow, and he worked at a studio called Filmation. And I went to him. I said, he goes, hey, look, we got all of our people are gone. We got 80% unemployment in the studio. We got this, the strike was a devastating strike. It was really, really bad. The union got like their asses handed to them, And so I said, look, just look at my work. Just look at my work. That's all I'm asking. Just look at my work. I says, okay, come on in tomorrow. This was a Thursday. Come on in tomorrow in the morning at this time. So I said, okay. So I went there, and I took my work, and I met him, and he showed my work, and then he took me to somebody else, and they took me to somebody else, and then they took me to the head of the studio, whose name was Lou Scheimer. And I laid out my work, on his desk there in his office, and he was a very good man, Lou Scheimer. And he asked me, says, "Are you familiar with what we do?" And I said, yes. I watched it. There was a cartoon called Black Star that was they'd done Star Trek. They did a lot of these kind of these super hero-ish type of stuff, and so it says, okay, start Monday. We're going to hire you, apprentice layout. Be here at 8:30. I said, thank you. So I went across the street, and there was a payphone there, So I threw in, and the first thing I did was I called my mother and my family. I said, I got it, Mom, I made it. I got it. I'm in the industry. I'm in animation. And I was a big hero. I was in my hometown. That was a really special time, because it was, like what I had gone through and all that stuff and everything. And I made it. I got in. And that afternoon I had an appointment with somebody who, with an apartment in Burbank, like right on the border, like across the street was North Hollywood. So I got into Burbank. I had an appointment. And since I had a job, I was able to get this apartment, and it all fell together in one day. I got a job in the morning. I got an apartment in the afternoon. And guess what I did on the weekend?
What'd you do on the weekend?
I drew on my stomach, on my elbows, in the living room with no furniture, nothing. I drew the concept sketches for this guy that I met through Pat Paris in San Diego, David Kirshner, who was, wanted to develop this. I did 2 really nice layouts for him that have since been lost. I didn't make any copies or anything like that, but I kept the concept sketches that I did in one of my sketchbooks. And I delivered it to him. I did it on my hand, on my elbows, and my stomach with the floor of my living room. And I did the initial concept sketches for An American Tail.
Oh my goodness.
For Steven Spielberg's American Tail. That's how it started. That's how Five O Moskowitz was born. That's how the whole concept for it was born. And I drove to his house and I delivered it and I got $500 and I thought, like, I am in, look at this. I came to LA, I got a job, I'm getting freelance, all this stuff. That's how it started. That's how I got into animation.
That last part I didn't see anywhere in my research whatsoever. So that part just like,
Yeah.
wow.
There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff I never got credit for. There's a lot of stuff that I've done that people aren't aware of,
Wow.
And that kind of followed me throughout my career. It wasn't until the internet and social media,
Okay.
that people that I could kind of like get my stories out and people start to realize that, what all the different things that I had done. But that's how it started. And then about, I don't know, maybe it was a month or two later, we were see what was going on at that time at Filmation, which isn't around anymore. And the great thing about Filmation Studios, the great thing was at that time, it was the only studio in America, let's say the only studio in Hollywood, that was doing animation for television, animation production, all under their roof. Right. Everybody else at that time had been sending their stuff to remote locations like Korea or Japan or something. That was the only place that was still doing it. So when you got a job at Filmation, you were exposed to everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, camera was there, ink and paint was there, storyboarding was there, the writers were there, everybody was there. So you learned a lot. You just learned a lot. And I remember there was hardly anybody there. I was just like, it was just a handful of people. And how I got in, I think it's because I just sold them on me. For some reason, I think I just sold myself.
Right.
And I was there, and I remember I had a room to myself, a whole room to myself, and I saw it. Well, and I thought, well, this is how it was when I was at Hallmark. I had my own personal, like booth, and it just little office area and stuff. Like all the artists, you had personal areas to work in, and I thought this is how it was in animation. So he was doing something called Return to Oz. They had done one season. They had done 7 episodes of a cartoon called Gilligan's Planet, which is based on the '60s show Gilligan's Island.
Right.
And he was very upset because he felt he had been betrayed by the networks, because the networks, he always bailed out the networks when they needed a show. And now the networks had turned their back on him and only given him like a few episodes. He was really he felt very betrayed by them. I remember him talking about that in my room when we were meeting with other artists and stuff. And then one day, we were doing all this development work, all these ideas. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just throwing all this stuff out and just saying, I just hope I'm doing okay. And then one day, this guy comes in and he brings in a box about yay big, and he brings in this box and it's filled with all these different action figures. What happened was they had done a commercial for this line of toys the year before, and it was very successful. It was like it was unusual for the time because you didn't see that much animation on TV. And they had done like a fully animated commercial for these line of toys and stuff. And he pulls out he pulls out these toys, and he's you get the good guys. He gave it to a lady named Carol Lundberg, and then he took out this other. You get the bad guys, and I think he gave it to a guy named Herb Hazelton. And since I was the new kid, he goes, so you're going to get the vehicles, and that was the beginning of He-Man.
Right.
Animated series. That was the beginning of He-Man. That's how it started. Mm-hmm. And I did have an opportunity to design, like characters and all that kind of stuff. But at the beginning, I was doing like the vehicles, and like when He-Man runs up and jumps on the sky sled and takes off, I didn't know what I was doing. And what I had done was I had done such a thorough job with the models of the vehicles. I had done it from every imaginable view, top, back, front, 3/4 up, 3/4 down, 3/4 up, all that stuff. And they were so impressed with that they thought that they wanted me to be the vehicle designer for it. So I'm not a vehicle designer, guys. I'm a character guy. I'm just looking at a toy in my hand and I'm able to design it. So they eventually understood, and I had to make a little bit of a ruckus, I would say. And then I started to design characters, and the very first characters that were not toys, but were the ones that I designed. I started that whole thing. And at that time, character design was a whole brand new category. It didn't exist. It wasn't like an isolated category. It was just either You were like an animator that designed the characters on the side, or a layout artist, or a storyboard artist. But it was at the very beginning when character design started to emerge as a separate, distinct category. And that's how I got involved with He-Man.
Right.
I stayed on for a while, and then I got restless, and then before I knew, the second person, the first person that I shared my office with when they started to hire people was a young 19-year-old artist who was awesome, amazing. I had never seen anybody so good, so young. And he'd be hunched over his drawing table. He's smoking cigarettes and stuff and everything. He's just punching all this stuff out. And we became really good friends, and that artist was Bruce Timm.
Oh.
You know Bruce Timm. Bruce Timm went on to become a legend on Batman.
Yeah.
And what he just came off of The Secret of Nim. Don Bluth's The Secret of Nim. And he was telling me all these stories about, there's a scene where some sort of like a cinder block is lowered down or something, and he had to do all these meticulous in-betweens and stuff, like hundreds of in-betweens, because it was such a slow moving, scene. And we talked about, that whole thing and stuff, and we became pretty good friends. And then more people started coming in as they started to hire everybody. And before you knew it, the whole room was jam-packed, and I didn't have any room at all. I was spoiled from Hallmark, and here I am. I'm just elbow to elbow with these guys, and I was elbow with this fellow, I don't know where he's from. He never showered. He never was. His body odor was absolutely repulsive. I was like, man, it's just like, this is not what I thought animation would be. And eventually I had to leave because I couldn't do anything like that. But everybody else there was used to it because that's the way that it is. I realized that you worked for 8 months. Okay, 6, 7, 8 months, and then you were laid off, and you had to wait until the spring, when everything started to gear up again and all that. So I didn't realize that. So I was learning a lot of hard lessons at the time. So I went off and I was trying different other things on my own, and then I eventually came back for the second season of He-Man, and then that's when we also developed She-Ra. We developed She-Ra. I was on the development team for She-Ra. Did a bunch of characters for that show, and then we did Brave Star on top of that, which was also kind of I would say a fairly, I don't know, kind of an ambiguous, it was for that time. I don't know. I always thought Brave Star was ambitious at the beginning, but it just kind of got lost to history, I think.
Right.
And yeah, but that's I just started, and then I did a lot of other things too. I remember being hired at a studio it was a startup studio called DIC, DIC.
DIC.
Doing Rainbow Bright, which was a Hallmark project, and Hallmark knew that I was in Burbank. I was in LA, and I got involved with that, and they did this Rainbow Bright movie, which I never saw, and I never got credit for the stuff that I did for that. And there was something else going on at ABC in television, which is a major TV network in LA, and I was doing like a Greek mythology project for that nothing ever happened with that. So there's a lot of stuff that I did that's never seen the light of day. I have an enormous amount of work that's never been seen. I haven't even taken a photo of this stuff. And it's like one of the things that I really have to get to, because I just have an enormous collection of art that I just haven't been able to archive or categorize or anything. But that's how my career got rolling. Those are the early years of my career.
I mean, that's quite a start, if I do say so myself. Like, goodness, like having your hands involved in like some of these like incredible cartoons, you said, like, developing stuff for American Tail, being a major hand when it came to He-Man and She-Ra, which to this day is still like some of the most celebrated stuff to this day. Like,
I know, I'll tell you, Nathan, I had no idea. Every single project that I worked on, without exception, I had no idea that decades later they would be as popular as they are.
I can only imagine.
No idea. I thought He-Man was going to be a bomb. I thought a bomb in the sense that it was a bad thing. I thought I was going to be a failure. I said, who's going to watch this thing? I mean, I was used to G.I. Joe. They can articulate the wrists and the elbows and all this stuff. The big doll from the original G.I. Joes and stuff.
Right.
And it was just like, you move this, you can move him around, stuff. I didn't realize that it was going to be, I just thought, and there's like, I just didn't realize it was going to be such a big hit. And it was enormous. At its peak, it had almost half the viewership of everybody who was watching television in the United States of America at that time.
Good Lord.
It was enormous. It was, I don't know how long that period lasted, but it was probably in the early days. But
I mean, I knew it was big. I never realized just how big
huge.
it was.
It was huge. It was huge. And every single time at 4:30, I'm sure it was, I think it came out at 4:30, ended at 5, or it came out at 4:30, ended, and then ended at 4:30, 4:30, ended at 5. I don't know. But there was one period in my life, one period where I wanted to make sure that, and this is especially true with Shira, because at the end of Shira, Lookie would appear. The little character of Lookie, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He had like a raccoon's tail. He was a very colorful little type character that would hide in the scene, and he would show up and he would tell you the moral of the story. Well, Lookie was my character.
Oh wow, really?
Lookie was absolutely my character. He was my character. So every day, Monday through Friday, I wanted to be sure that I was at a television set somewhere where I could see Lookie for the little minute that he was on, and catch my name on the credits and all that kind of stuff and everything, because that, my family was very excited about all that, and so it was a wonderful, really, really a wonderful time. But it was troubling as well, because there were so many things going on in animation at that time that I really found infuriating, and that manifested itself later on in a lot of crazy things that I did, but it turned out to be for the best, because the whole toy-based thing that was going on in the 80s, you guys don't realize this, but it was extremely stifling, and extremely, extremely stifling. We were smothered. And there was so much exasperation and frustration with the animation community at that time, with the artists and stuff like that. We didn't, it was fun. We had absolutely loads of fun, but it just wasn't right. I don't know how to express it or how to describe it, but it eventually ran its course,
Right.
And it ran its course from a show called The Spiral Zone.
Okay.
Which is a very obscure series that was aired, at least in LA, it aired for a very short period of time. And it aired like at 5:00 in the morning, so nobody saw it.
Right.
And that was the first time that I was an art director, was The Spiral Zone.
Okay.
And I put together that crew. Now, that the Spiral Zone was such an absolutely corrupt production that it really, we were the highest paid crew in all of animation at the time. Yes. I was one of the highest paid artists in animation, and everybody that I put together for that crew were the highest paid crew. We were getting paid close to double what all the other studios were getting.
And they were only giving you a 5:00 in the morning time slot for that?
Well, we had nothing to do with that. That was not it. But what we had to do was, I heard about that. They were paying a lot of money at this one studio, and it was right in a real kind of grungy part of Hollywood.
All right.
So I went and I made an appointment with the producer, and I met her, and she was a real she was tough. She was very unpleasant, and she wanted to see my Rolodex, and I said, "What does the Rolodex have to do with anything?" Because then her mind, and the mind of all these people who are not animation artists. These guys were primarily known for their live action shows that they've done. A good art director has a Rolodex. An art director has nothing to do with the art. It's just nothing to do. It's mostly, I learned that an art director is simply just somebody who organizes things, who breaks the script down,
okay,
makes assignments. These characters here need to be designed, these backgrounds, these props, these vehicles, all that kind of stuff. And but I went to her and I just said, "I'm the best art director in town." And I just said it. I don't know if it was true or not.
Hey, you gotta have that confidence. That's what
I convinced her to hire me, and it was really, there's another guy who was in contention for this, didn't get it because I guess he was made an impression because he had a big Rolodex, But I just had a lot of confidence, and I just said, I can put together the best team that you can possibly imagine, And so she said, so they hired me, and they gave me. They put me on the floor of a 3-story building. It was like 112 or 113 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know what it is in what that would be in Australia. I think like 40, 45 degrees, something like that, you know. It was a shack on top of a roof of this building that they were using to dump old office furniture and boxes and boxes and boxes of scripts.
Okay.
And I had a little white drawing table and a telephone. And they said, you have 24 hours to get a look down for this show. Yeah, 24 hours to get, and with this situation, I said, okay. So I got on the phone and I called up. You know, this was a kind of a period where there was a little bit of a slowdown in animation at this particular time, or you know, there were the people that I knew fortunately were available, and I called up Bruce Tim. Bruce, you got a job? Are you working? No. Well, you got a job. Get over here now. You're getting paid this much money. You know? And I called up Philip J. Felix, a great artist, a great friend of mine who I met. One of the artists that they hired out of high school at Hallmark that I met. He was a very kind of rebellious person like me. I said, Philip, are you working anywhere? No. Goes, well, you got a job. Get over here now. And I called up, you know, Joe Pearson, you know, just who I eventually did Crash with, and all these, and I put together the superstar team. You know, a guy named Don Greer, a guy named one of the guy gave a real early break. You know, like the first job that Stephen Olds ever had, and he was doing like architectural work. And he wasn't one of the ones that I initially contacted, but eventually, you know, I think it was Bruce Tim, Philip Felix, Don Greer, and we just started. You know, we just barreled through it in this horrendously hot environment with no equipment, all the kind, and we got all the pre-production stuff together within a couple of weeks. Maybe, you know, I know it was 2 weeks. We sent it all over to Korea, where they were going to animate, you know, like the opening of the show, whatever. And we saved the thing, and they scored the deal because of what we did. And they scored a 65 half-hour episodes of the Spyro Zone, and they got the money. And we went from that shabby shack on the roof to most elegant high-rise offices that you could ever imagine. We were on the 32nd floor. They have lots of sky rises in Westwood now, the Westwood part of LA, which is where UCLA is. And at the time, they only had 2 high-rise, like for LA, they would be skyscrapers. And we were on the top floor, 32 stories out. You could see all the way to Catalina Island. You could see the entire shore. You know, it was just like we could see an unobstructed view. We had floor to ceiling windows, you know, and we were the highest paid crew in all of LA. And we you know, we got the whole Spyro Zone rolling. And I could make an entire show about just the Spyro Zone.
Yeah,
what we did and all that kind of stuff and everything, and we were great. We kicked ass, and but what happened was, you know, they gave creative control to the toy company.
Oh.
And we were very frustrated. They told us at the beginning they wanted to make this like an award-winning series,
right?
Okay? Really, and then we started to get there, and these moronic executives are trying to tell us what to make things look like. And we were getting faxes from the toy company telling us what to make, the art directing us, telling us what to do. And I went to my crew and I said, save all those, save every single one of those faxes. And I had a stack. By the time I can only endure it for about 6 months, a stack like that. Like
goodness.
That. Just like a big stack of fax communication. And what happened was, a couple years later, they were having hearings in Washington, D.C. about re-regulating advertising on children's television, because it totally gotten out of hand, because it was all being controlled by toy companies. And and of course, you know, you had the lobbyists in Washington who were saying, you know, like, if it wasn't for the toy companies, animation would be dead and all that kind of stuff. And I said, if it wasn't for you guys, we'd be having a second golden age, you know, that Don Bluth was heralding. You know, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to be out there, was because I wanted to be where, you know, I wanted to be part of the second golden age, you know.
Right.
And so I got in contact with this advocacy group in Washington, and they never knew who I was. We had like a code name for me, and I would get directly to this lady, and she was a very prominent lady. who has since passed away. And I told her, I'm going to send you the proof that you need about how intrinsically involved the toy companies are in children's entertainment, because it was basically half-hour commercials we were doing, you know. And I sent it to them. And I remember like this whole argument of chicken or the egg, you know, which came to the truth, it doesn't matter, all that kind of stuff. And I sent it out to them. And the congressman, the senator who was overseeing this whole thing, all of a sudden, you read it in the trades, you know, like in Variety and Hollywood Report, all that kind of stuff, said, if the entertainment and the motion picture, whatever association, whatever, if they do not voluntarily re-regulate children's advertising on children's television, we will do it for you.
Oh, wow.
And immediately they shut it all down because they had the proof. And a lot of that proof went into the congressional record. And what happened as a result of that was the Children's Television Act of 1990. You can research that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's what opened the door for Ren and Stimpy, Batman, Dexter's Lab, all the golden age cartoons of the 1990s, because we got the toy companies out of our way. And it happened because of the Spiral Zone and the communication that I sent to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt how they were directing us. And I'll give you an example of how they were directing us, which is one of the things I really resent about Hollywood. I really resent, because they pander to the lowest common denominator. They want to make it's like making intellectually stimulating content is they're not interested in that, because the toy company told us in their communication. There was one character, by the way, Aiden, this was an Australian character that was in there, and he fell in a puddle, and he says, and the line was, "I feel like a waterlogged wallaby." Okay, look at me, I feel like a waterlogged wallaby. And the research, the toy company said, we did research. We researched that 50% of high school seniors do not know what a wallaby is. Therefore, change it to a waterlogged kangaroo. So why in the world are you catering to the 50% who don't know what a wallaby is, as opposed to the ones that do know what a wallaby is? I mean, half of them don't know, half of them do know, you know? So I'm saying, see, that's how they work. That's how this whole system works. It works to make you stupid. It just, you know, I can work on that. I can talk about that for a very long time. And I know a lot of the stuff that I say can be controversial and all that kind of stuff, but this comes from my own personal experience from years and years and years in this business. Okay. And you know, so we were able, because of stuff like that. And so like change the label, change the logo on his chest, on his body armor to this logo and all that kind of stuff. And it was all about featuring the toys. And we shut it down, and that opened up the 1990s. That opened up the 1990s. And it happened because of my crew. And it happened because of this mysterious person that would be calling Washington, D.C. and telling him, I'm going to send you something that's going to push this whole thing through for you. That's how I did. That's how I did it. These are all things that nobody knows. Nobody knows. Because for one thing, I don't have the opportunity to tell people. And that thing is like, you know, really, I don't know, just, I guess in the grand scheme of things, it really, I don't know what kind of a difference it makes, and, you know, but it was, you know, I've always been fighting, you know, I got to animation, and I've always been a fighter, you know, fighting for what I felt was the right thing to do, you know, so.
I mean, from everything that you just told us right here, and just this little early section, we hadn't even touched the 90s yet, but everything that you've had a hand in one way or another is absolutely insane. How much you've been a real driving force for animation one way or another, either helping out with major designs or really changing how the industry, how animation changed. Honestly, for the better, considering some of the amazing stuff that we got in the 90s. I mean, I didn't even realize.
A lot of people don't want you to know about me. Okay, they try to trivialize me. They try to, you know, like all this, they try to like a pharaoh's name, like a disgraced pharaoh. They would go into, you know, they take his cartouche and they would you know, like chisel it off of the walls and stuff like that. His name shall never be remembered and repeated. It became something like that over time. You know, it did, you know, eventually, you know, like everything that I was saying at this point, I was like, you know, I like to like look at things like this is the direction things are going. And I like to project that into the future and say the future is going to be this. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people didn't want to hear it, or they thought that I was against them when I'm on your side, you know, but they're so warped and twisted the way their perspective on things. You know, they're so indoctrinated into, you know, like this one particular way of thinking that, you know, it just, you know, and everything that I said would happen happened. You know, it's just, it's not, you know, like you don't have to look in their crystal ball. All you have to do is just extrapolate, you know, from that and just project and all that. And you can see the direction that things are going in. And it wasn't what they wanted to hear. So, you know, yeah, so I fought a lot of battles. I fought a lot of battles in animation, and I am still swinging away.
How is there not like a documentary series or a podcast series or just a full-length documentary just based on that little early bit alone that you just talked right there? Like that alone, I'm gonna lead the charge at some point to make that a reality, because I want people to hear more about this stuff past this podcast, because that just sounds like incredible. Like how much of a hand you had early on. That's insane one way or another. I was gonna say, Aiden, you were trying to say something for a second there.
About the fucking waterlogged wallaby thing.
What?
I'm still
like, look at the way that it rolls off your tongue.
It rolls off the tongue. A waterlogged kangaroo. What the fuck does that mean?
That's some of the stuff that we had to deal with. You know.
Have you seen a kangaroo in water? Don't go near it. It's trying to kill you. Those fuckers are terrifying.
Yeah, that's how you know, that's how it was. You got to remember, this was a long time ago. And things have changed, I think, in many ways for the better since then.
Absolutely.
You know,
at least.
Yeah, but there was some dark. You know, there was at that time I had broken away. I think one of the reasons why I've had the I don't know, I'm kind of like disenfranchised from what people would consider like the mainstream animation community, is because I just took the road less traveled. You know, I wasn't really, I just didn't like working at the studios. There were a lot of things about the studios and the culture of it and all that stuff and everything that didn't appeal to me. And what happened was after the Spiral Zone, I broke off, and I had been I broke away, and I had been developing my own project for quite some time. And I had been pitching this project before the Spiral Zone. Okay. Before, you know, I've been pitching it actually before, you know, like in the mid 80s, the very first pitch that I made. I've been developing it for several years. I was intrigued by the idea, and it had to do with, ironically, with a kangaroo, you know, a kangaroo and a koala bear team. And I saw the trend in the early 80s towards like Australian things, you know, just Australia just became something. I don't know, I always had this, the appealing, like being out in the middle of nowhere and wandering off into the distant horizon was always something that appealed to me. And I saw that, I kind of like saw that with Australia, you know, this big land it's like, you know, almost, you know, like marginally inhabited and stuff. And I started to see, and I started to kind of, but it wasn't about Australia. I wasn't developing a cartoon about Australia. It was about these particular characters, and there'd be other characters that would be involved. It wasn't about Australia. It was just an unusual thing. And the very first concept that I ever developed was at Hallmark. And what Hallmark knew is they realized that I like to create characters. So what happened was, after about a year there, they had bought 3 weeks of my time from my department, and I had gone to this new division that had just started called creative licensing.
Okay.
And what they were doing was they had seen the success of Strawberry Shortcake, and Strawberry Shortcake was a cartoon that came out in the very late 70s, I think about 79. And what happened was Strawberry Shortcake was a big success. But it was different because nothing like it had been done at the time, because Strawberry Shortcake was created in a corporate environment. It was created by American Greetings, which was a competitor to Hallmark. American Greetings was in Cleveland. And Hallmark saw this, and they said to themselves, well, why in the world, you know, should we be licensing like the Pink Panther and the Muppets and Disney characters and all that kind of stuff? We could be creating our own. So I said, oh, so they hired me, you know, to develop this concept. And I developed the concept for what would be their first Saturday morning cartoon. But they kept the concept but they threw out all my characters and they replaced them with a line of greeting cards that they already had, which was very popular. And there was these cute little characters, like insipidly cute characters, that had these T-shirts on them. They had messages like "Hug me," "I'm kissable," all that kind of stuff. Just is real. It was like like a card that you sent to your grandma.
Right.
Or like a like a just that kind of thing. And that turned out to be Shirt Tales, which was a cartoon that aired on NBC for at least one season, like about 84, I'm saying 83, 84, 85 in that period. And Shirt Tales was my idea. The whole thing, how I did was come up with a group of characters that would be an adventure team that would live underneath that had headquarters underneath the White House. And whenever the president needed needed extra help, these characters would come out and take care of the situation for him. So they replaced my characters with these other, like greeting card characters, like a little opossum, like a little tiger cub, and all this kind of stuff. And that became Shirt Tales. Okay. And you can see it if you watch Shirt Tales. It'll say created by Hallmark Cards on it, and that's how another thing that I never got credit for. It shows you how I had my fingers in lots of stuff that was going on back then. Again, unknowingly, I didn't really know that anything was going to happen. I was just fortunate to be in the right place at the right time consistently, And so there were some characters that I had in the back of my head around this time, and I just said, I'm not willing to give up on this. I think there's something here. So I started to work, and I started to kind of explore, what can their relationship be? How can this whole thing? And by the time of February 1986, I had enough material. I had done big panels, gigantic panels. This is the way that pitching was done at the beginning. This is the very beginning of pitching to the networks. The very beginning of pitching. But before this, it was just like the studios went in and they worked with the networks, and they just came up with shows. But there was a guy there named Phil Mendez, and Phil Mendez created a show called Kissy Fur, which was also on NBC. And he was an inspiration to me. First of all, he was a great artist. And I was really if Phil Mendez can do it, everybody else, we can do it. So I put together this elaborate presentation with beautiful paintings and big, just character model panels and all this stuff. And it took three people, including myself, to take it into NBC. And Philip was one of the artists that was with me, Felix, and went in, and we met with the vice president of children's programming at NBC, and we came there. She had like an entourage of 3 people, and it was in a big conference room and stuff. And my goodness, man, I swear, if I met somebody in the networks or in the studio, the networks and all this stuff, who was actually like marginally pleasant, it would have changed the course of my life and my career. But these people are just, it was like they go to school to take like advanced courses on how to be mean, how to be mean, how to be just so unpleasant, and I'm looking at this lady, I'm saying, where the hell are you coming from? What do you mean? And I actually started like to lock horns with her.
Okay. And
she was telling me, she was like looking at her watch, all that kind of stuff. And her assistants were all fidgeting because they saw this artwork that it was just like, they were just blown away by the artwork, but she was just trying to play it real cool and all that kind of stuff. And you have to understand, this is some of my early experience with executives,
right?
Which transpired into like a complete disdain for them later on. And I can elaborate on that if you want, because I think it's a major, major, major problem. A major problem, certainly in Hollywood, certainly in the nation, and I think in American industry overall. That from what I hear from other people, not from my personal experience, I can tell you that is a major, major problem. At that time, it was a major, and it still is. As far as
I'll say, to be fair, that's why we currently, there's so many different strikes in so many different industries, especially the actors strike right now.
Dude, they suck.
I was gonna say, like, the fact that
absolutely in the animation industry, I don't know of any single person I've ever worked with who I looked at and say, I could do a better job than you if you would just shut up and get out of the way. You have no business doing this. You have really no business in the position that you're at. You don't know what you're looking at. You don't know what you're talking about. And this is over and over and over and over again. I don't know one person that I ever worked with. I look at and say, yeah, this guy is like really knows his stuff. Maybe they're there. I'm not saying that they're not. I just have never met them. you know? So in any case, I took this thing and I'm like, you know, and she's saying, and she's going to me and she's saying, why should I give you, why should I, pick up your show when I have people coming in here with, I think it was either 14 or $16 million to back their shows up. And I stopped and I said, oh, that's how it works. That's how it works. You're bribed. They bribe you. Maybe they weren't. Maybe they're talking about we can back it up with $14 million in marketing and advertising. We can produce it, or we can all that kind of stuff, you know. But I said, so this is how it works, you know. And she says, go out and you need to, you know, sell this. You make a toy out of it, sell it, you know, go into publishing, do something with it. In other words, it's what this is all about, folks. Is this is what's called, you must if you want to sell to these people, it has to be what's called a pre-sold concept. You have to go out there and you have to like make it popular and make it a hit basically on your own, and then and develop an audience, and then they'll be interested. Okay, but I didn't know. You know, I'm saying, did the Hanna-Barbera do that? You know, did Hanna-Barbera do that with Magilla Gorilla? Did Hanna-Barbera, it's just, you know. So in any case, I looked at her and I said, and I got really, really adamant, and I said, this is going to be a film. And the room was silent. And she goes, and I said, is there anything else? And they went, no. I said, well, then you can go. And I dismissed them from their own meeting in their own meeting room, and they left. And I don't know what was going on with my head at that time. If I went back in time, I certainly would do it the way that I did. And then I realized something. I realized, you know what? They got little tiny microphones hanging from the ceiling. And you know, back over there against the wall, behind that little smoke windows, they have cameras. They're recording this whole thing. So we went around the microphones and we left them some pretty juicy messages, you know. And then we picked up and I left, and I would start to pitch. I pitched to everybody. I pitched to the second person I pitched to was a writer at an animation studio that I'm not going to mention his name or the studio, but I know that they were doing that. They were the studio that did Disney's overseas production.
Okay.
And the whole concept was, look, you do an adventure series with these animal-based characters, and it's going to be a syndicated thing, you know, just like He-Man, all that kind of stuff. What we do with an adventure series, anime, and it's all this, you know, very imaginative and all this kind of stuff and everything. And I remember him telling me, well, you're going to need more than pretty pictures for this, you know. And he was basically saying, like, you know, we're the writers, and we, you know, we're like the dominant, you know, we dominate, you know. And he was hostile too, you know. I was very nice to all these people. It's not, and I pitched it to everybody, and a couple years later, here comes DuckTales. And here comes Rescue Rangers, and here comes Darkwing Duck, all this kind of stuff. It was a completely new genre. If you look at what's happening in animation at that time, this was a completely new genre. And I'm not accusing anybody of ripping me off or anything like that. All I'm saying is the idea, the seed for it was planted. I know it was planted by the fact that I was going around and sharing this idea and showing my artwork and all the kind of stuff. And everything that I was talking about morphed into this whole new way of this whole new genre of animated content for television, you know, at the time. And by the way, guess what? A couple years after that presentation, NBC, guess what shows up in an episode of Kissifer?
What shows up in an episode?
And a character identical to the lead character of my project. And you know what they said? What? It's not a kangaroo, it's a wallaby.
Oh my, so how the tables have turned.
So I got my lawyer on it, and we settled some things. And I got them to sign a contract that they were ever going to do a cartoon with a kangaroo or a wallaby, that they have to give me 90 days notice so that I can prepare a lawsuit against them. Okay, that's how everything transpired with NBC. And again, a lot of this stuff people don't know because it's just, you know, hidden in, you know, it's hidden in a dark corner somewhere, you know. But this is if you want to know about my career and my history and all that kind of stuff, these are the things that I experienced. This is everything a lot of the things that I did that nobody knows, you know. So I went there and I started to develop this thing on my own, and I had some really bad experiences. I got involved with the wrong people. Man, I went through. So I thought, and this is, folks, you got to understand something. This is one of the reasons why I am so enthusiastic about what's happening today. Because if the technology and the resources that are available to us today were available back then, I would have never wasted my time.
Right.
I would have never wasted my time offering, starting a company, incorporating a company, and then offering stock in the company to investors and all this kind of stuff to get the money to do my project. And then the people that were raising the money, the management company, the investment company was doing this, wound up running off with all the money. Okay, so I went through some like major embezzlements and stuff, and that left me like totally, man, like down and out, boy, and this is how I started. This is how the '90s started for me. This is how the '90s started for me. Like looking for a couple of nickels to rub together so that I could buy some dog biscuits for my dog and some a can of tuna, to eat, all that kind of stuff. And it was a very, very rugged time. It was a very rugged, I almost had to go back to my days living in a tent, but it was a very typical time. And a lot of my friends, a lot of the people that I brought into the business, that I brought into the industry, into the business, turned their backs on me, and I had I found out who my friends really were at this time. And you know who my friends were?
Who were your friends?
My friends were the Burbank locals. The friends that I had made, the town guys, the town people that I had met, who I had gotten very close with, and they're the ones that got me through it. It wasn't the animation community that got me through it. It wasn't my friends. I know that I had, the sympathy. Supposedly, I guess, I had, maybe some of them were empathetic and stuff, but I certainly didn't get anything. And then slowly things started to break, and I got a little bit work here and there and stuff, and but it was humiliating, and it was a really, really, difficult, extremely difficult time for me. I mean, not just materially and physically, just mentally. It was just a very, very tough thing to go through.
Right.
And that's about that time, because I had to become a lawyer overnight. I had to become an accountant overnight, and I went after these guys. And I realized I've learned something from my investigations and stuff. What happened was I had a relative who was in law school, and there's a certain kind of couple of programs that you can get and I had just started on the internet. I got real early on the internet. So what happened was he gave me his password to access this certain data program that was accessible only to attorneys. And I found out that these guys that I was dealing with were a suspended corporation. You know what that means?
What does that mean?
It means that every contract that you sign with them is null and void.
Oh.
And that the ownership of my property, everything, it all came back to me. And I was able to partially fund that project. And I spent the '90s as much as I could. I spent the '90s, and every little chance I get, every window I could, I'd get a little break from work. I come from work, and a little bit. And it took me 8.5 years, and I finished the animated pilot.
And
nobody's seen it yet.
That's.
And let me tell you something else. The reason why I was able to finish, I'm sorry for going off like this.
No, please.
This is my story.
You don't understand how much I love hearing about this. So go on.
Okay. And this is how I did it. I did it because I think it was 1993, February of 1993. And I had salvaged some of my equipment. The idiot I was partners with, we got ourselves, we were in a building in Burbank, which was supposed to be a production facility. We were only there for like a month, and we signed a 5-year lease on it. And I had to abandon that building after months. So I would hold on to some drawing tables. I held on to the Xerox machine. I held on to a few things. And a friend of mine had a little like a storefront space in North Hollywood. And I moved everything in there, like I just banded overnight, just moved everything in there, and I just got settled, and I kept on going on. I kept going. and we had I was able to record the voices and all this kind of stuff, everything. And then I heard about this computer animation system, and I thought at the time that they're making cartoons with computers, they're colorizing them with computers, and I thought when I was first hearing about this, I thought that it was some sort of like a conveyor belt system where you had the animation cells these with the line, the Xerox line, and it was I saw this in my mind that a needle came down and touched it and like automatically filled up the animation cells and stuff. I thought that's what they were using computers to physically color animation cells.
Right.
Then they heard about this animation program. So I went down the street to a video store. Like they had like a video cameras and stuff, like security cameras and everything. And it was just down the street, a few blocks in Burbank. So I walked down there and I went in and said, I'd like to see the computer animation system that you've got. And I said, okay, come over here. And there was a little 486. I don't know if I'm sure that's before your time.
What? Yeah.
There's a little 46 with like 66 megahertz.
Okay.
It was basically a word processing back when computers were used primarily for word processing.
Mm-hmm.
And they had this program there called AXA, which isn't around anymore. And I said, and I don't know, you may have heard of a show from the 90s called The Nanny.
Yes.
The Nanny. It had a little animated opening for The Nanny.
Right.
That's what they used for The Nanny. And they showed this program, and I was like, what? What? Like, you have to understand something. If you wanted to make animation at that time, you had to take your drawings to a Xerox service that would, like photocopy them onto an animation cell and take those cells to an ink and paint service where they would color the ink using cell vinyls, paints, and all that kind of stuff, put on a white glove and paint all between the lines and all that stuff. And then that would go to a multiplane camera. And a multiplane camera was high technology, and you needed like at least a 2-story building for it, and you had like 6 layers of animation,
right.
And it was very complex about getting all that kind of like this layer moving faster than this layer, all that stuff. And this had not only did it automatically color your cells. You scan the drawing, you brought into to an exposure sheet. It had independent camera movement on each one, and it had 100 levels.
Goodness.
100 levels of animation. And I was looking at this, and I said, I saw the future. I saw the future. And I went to all my friends, and I went to everybody that I knew, and I was jumping up and down, and I was saying, everything that you know about animation is going to change. Absolutely everything. Where you can make animation, people can make animated films in their living rooms, in the corner of their bedroom. They're going to be making it in your apartment. You have seen nothing like it's amazing. It's going to change everything. And they all thought I was a lunatic. They all thought, oh, it's Charles again going off on his little thing, whatever, just going off on stuff. Because I can be kind of animated myself at times, I admit it. But a year later, all those places were out of business.
Oh wow!
They were out of business. The ink and paint services were mostly gone. The multiplane camera guys were gone. They were just the Xerox places were gone. And there were 3 programs that they're using about that time. There was AXA. There was one called Animo, which is like a high-end thing, and there was another one called US Animation.
Okay.
Which I think turned into Toon Boom.
Okay.
I think that was like the mother company that eventually turned into Toon Boom. I'm not sure. But that's what was happening at the time. So I go in and I made that investment in computers, and everyone was trying to tell me that send this to Japan, send this all that kind of stuff. I said, no, this isn't the way to do it. I know they're going to screw it up. I know this isn't the way to do it. Let's go this. We'll be pioneers. We'll be pioneers. We can do this, and we can do that here. We can do it with the people that are here. But the guys I was working with were the old model. It was like, well, I'm an executive. I'm an animation executive because I have connections to an overseas studio. And that makes me an animation executive. That's the way that they go. That's the way that it is. And I just said, well, I have no use for you. I just, this isn't the way I'm going to go. And I really had a hard time with this because it was another episode where everybody kind of, scattered, and but I was able to hold on to a little bit of the money that that they stole, and and I was able to use that over a period of time. And by the time I was getting to the end of it, I had animated the whole thing by myself. I mean, I did the whole thing by myself. I had in between it by myself. I was scanning it by myself, and I had a 90 megahertz Pentium with an astonishing 1 gigabyte hard drive. It was like astonishing, and I think I had 16 megabytes of RAM, and it cost me $1,000 to buy 32 extra megabytes of RAM. I got it up to 48, and I had no way. I didn't know how to back this stuff up. I had nothing like that, and but I kept going. I kept going. I kept going. I kept going, and eventually, after 8.5 years, I had it done. And you will never believe the day that I finished it.
When was the day that you finished it?
September 10th, 2001.
Oh my! What?
Had the Betamax, the digibators, whatever they call it, in my hand, and I was ready to conquer the world. And I get up the next day, and I just saw what was going on. I just said, "Well, so much for that. This isn't the time for it. I have to. I'm too. I don't know how to put it. It's like it's not the time for it. I have to
right.
The time has to be right for it, But I kept working on it, kept developing it. I just kept at it no matter what. But what happened was when I got to when I started my school, the reason I started my school was to finish that film, was to finish that episode. And what happened was after about 6 months, I had enough people skilled enough, and I had taken some of that money and I started a paid internship program for my students. And they did like some of the last in between that had to be done. And I finished it. After that, I finished it pretty quickly. And every single one of the students that worked on that made it into the industry. Because we got around a catch-22. And the catch-22 was that you can't get into animation unless you have production experience. This is, well, how can you get production experience? Well, you have to get into animation. So I said, well, you're going to have production experience working on this thing. And that's how we got around it, So, and then I finished it, and that's how the Animation Academy was born. And by that time, it was the late '90s. It was like I think '98, and and I had done enough to. And then, as I said, I finished it in 2001. So that's how I spent the '90s on my aside from Crash and Spyro and the other things that I had. That I had done. So.
Right, absolutely. I mean, goodness, like talk about like all the different times you talk about either being the right place at the right time or the worst place at the worst time when it comes to your stuff. Like that is absolutely insane. There's no in-betweens whatsoever.
So
I definitely want to talk more about the Animation Academy in a second, but you did mention that aside from getting that started, and trust me, I definitely want to talk a lot about that. Let's get into like less of animation, some of the video game stuff that you kind of, we've been mentioning offhand, stuff like that. Now, obviously, I don't know how many people realize this nowadays, but you had a major hand developing some of the biggest mascots in video game history, starting with probably, the one that more people will probably know nowadays, Crash Bandicoot. How did the opportunity come to you to work on a project like that?
Well, this is how it happened. It was during that dark period. I was just starting to come out of it. And I was working on, I think I was working at Deke. And Deke was great because they didn't care, I mean, the guy who ran that studio was just, he didn't care. But we did. The artists did. And there was a show that was on there. It was really just, I don't know, I was working a whole bunch of different shows. In 1991, I worked on every single Saturday morning cartoon in NBC's lineup, and I did it at
Wow.
I worked on a show called Wish Kid. I worked on a show called Pro Stars. It had like Michael Jordan in it.
Yeah.
I had Where's Waldo. I worked on G.I. Joe. I worked on I can't remember all the shows I did, but whatever they were, I did a bunch.
I just want to say super quickly, because as I was doing my research, I saw one of the shows you possibly had a hand in was Sonic the Hedgehog, the animated series in the 90s or whatnot, 93.
I didn't do much.
Okay.
And that was a very bad experience for me because
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it was just really, it was during I was trying to deal with the embezzlement, and I was, all that kind of stuff. And I really it just didn't work out. I mean, I did some stuff on it, mostly storyboarding,
Yeah.
Um,
Well, actually, that might lead to a follow-up question that I had about that show just real quickly, because I've had a previous guest on the podcast that also worked on that show. I'm wondering if you two have met. Does the name Joe Horn ring a bell to you?
yeah,
Yeah, I was gonna say I've had him on the podcast before as
yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah. Joe Horn. There are people that I've worked with briefly.
Hmm.
Um, our paths might cross for a little while, and then we just kind of go our separate ways.
Right.
Whatever. And it's yeah, Joe Horn. Man, Terry Shikasho was an artist. She was like a color key background artist.
Okay.
So background designs would go to her, and she would do the color, like the color keys, which would go into the pre-production package, which would go to the animation studio, I think, in Korea at that time. There was a guy there named, yeah, like really, really great artists, really great artists. But you really can't do your best work because, they just, like some of the times you're working, they're just committed to mediocrity.
Right.
And
Right.
Chuck Patton was working there. He was my art director, and I really enjoyed working with him. And he went on to do some noteworthy projects. But what happened was there was another fellow that I had known that I first met when I was working in the days of Rainbow Bright.
Hmm.
And that was Joe Pearson, and he was I think he was an illustrator, or graphic designer, and he was working on Care Bears. It was a show called Care Bears, and he was working there. And that's when I first met him, and we got along really, really well. I had a very, I just really enjoyed Joe's company. He's a great conversationalist. I really enjoyed talking with him about all these different things that he's into. And I was giving him some tips. This is his first time working in animation, so I remember giving him some tips and stuff. And we stayed in touch and stuff. And Joe was like another like kind of I don't know, like, what do you want to call it, like a free spirit, you
Okay.
know.
Yeah.
And he was somebody that was doing adventurous things outside the studio system. And he had done something, I think, probably in the early '90s called Colette 45.
Okay.
And it's kind of like nobody's ever seen it because he hasn't released it. But Colette 45 was a pilot episode he did that actually had that he animated in Ukraine. And he
Okay.
went over to the Ukraine. He got this thing done. This, of course, was years before the current situation.
Right. Right.
But he came back and it was really pretty cool. It was really pretty cool. And he was going off and doing all these different things. And then I got a call from him because he was working on an animated project. He was working at Universal, doing something that I don't know exactly what, but he's just doing something on his own, which was going to be like an animated pilot for The Crow, which was I think Brandon Lee, I think that's his name, which was like the son of Bruce Lee.
Right. Right.
And it turned, so he said, hey, there's these people here, they want to do something with video games.
Hmm.
And I thought you might come to mind, if you got nothing going on, it might be a good project for us. I said, yeah, okay. And but see, you have to understand something. At that time, video games was very frowned upon. And
Right.
that
Right.
there's a hierarchical system in the studios in animation. At the very top is feature films, and then you have television, and then you have maybe like close to it would be like commercials, and then
Mhm.
like direct to video. And video games was like rock bottom.
Right.
It was like the back alley stuff in animation.
Well, I
But
mean, to be fair, I would say to be fair, at this point, like we weren't too far away from like the early era, especially like the Atari stuff, with the
right,
Crash and stuff like that. Like we weren't too far removed from that era.
right. But there was also, just to follow up on what you're saying. When I was working at the Spyro Zone, we were the first studio to actually use, that I'm aware of, to actually use digital production in our system. We were the first ones to actually do like our background keys on a commercial, on a computer, excuse me.
Okay.
And there was a guy there named Kelly Day who eventually went to Disney, and he was very close with Joe. And I remember like all that stuff all that activity was going on at that time in the Spyro Zone. The Spyro Zone was 86, 87. So by the early 90s, video games had progressed beyond, I would say, Pac-Man and all that kind of stuff. And Joe contacted me and said, yeah, I'll do it. It sounds like fun. I was always open to do different things. I was always I've never had a really problem doing things that, would be different. And so after a while, I can't remember exactly how the communication was going, but I know that he was having some issues with some people that he was involved with on a business level.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't working out. So he came back. He basically took the project back, and he said, "Can we use your company to kind of, like as a to something that can organize this?" And I said, "Yeah," because I had still kept my company that had all these problems with, but it was still, like it was still a viable company. And so we used this, and he negotiated his attorney negotiated the contract. And this was about December of '94. It was like mid-December of '94, and I let Joe do all that stuff. I just let him do it because it was his baby. He's the one who was at Universal, and we started going. And he started working on it even before I did. He was just Joe's like that kind of person. He's like very enthusiastic. He just jumps right into things. And I wanted to wait until all the business was taken care of. And at that time, we had gone to Universal, and we met with a couple of young guys who were just in town, And these guys were, one of them was Jason, a guy named Jason. Another guy was a guy named Andy. And we met with Universal in one of the bungalows that they had, little bungalows like back off, to the side of the studios where like Alfred Hitchcock would work and stuff.
Okay.
And it was a small little place, and there was a guy there named Rob Beniaz, who was the president of Universal Interactive, and there was a fellow there named David Siller, who was the original producer of what would become Crash Bandicoot. And I remember showing my portfolio to these guys, and they seemed to really like it. And so I was part of it, and then we started doing these concepts and stuff, and we just started drawing, just crazy stuff. And I just started going off of, we're gonna do something with a wombat,
Right.
like a mutated wombat. So I just started doing all these designs, and for some reason, Jason started to connect with what Joe was doing, because the one thing about Joe is Joe does some like really offbeat, wacky stuff.
Okay.
He does and he comes up with really, really unusual things. And they seemed to be going along with him. And I said, yeah, that's smart. I'm perfectly fine with that and stuff. And I was just kind of like feeding off of that. And then he did this one sketch of this character, which they seemed to be feel very strongly about. So what I started doing was I basically was kind of like riding shotgun. So I was just like, I was taking what Joe was doing and trying to make sense out of it, because it wasn't necessarily, a lot of times when you're not, Joe's is primarily was known for be a background designer and a layout artist. I don't think he did that much character work, but he was doing character work here. And what I had to do was, first of all, make it work, because when you're designing a character for animation, it has to function.
Right.
Okay, you're engineering it, so to speak. You have to develop a design theory for it. Okay, like you got this character, but how does it walk? How does it look? How does it work? And there were a lot of things about it that just you can't hide. That just needed work. Right? To figure it out. Like his mouth. His mouth is like takes up his whole body, and the only way that this works is with a character smiling. So one of the things I did was they expected me to make it work, make it animatable, and then like make the character act. So when I started making the character, kind of making it giving it a personality, giving the character I was just like, how does the mouth look with his pouting, how does he look when it's angry, all this kind of stuff. And I was able to kind of like solve all those issues, and then I just kind of started to have fun with it, and I just said, this is I just wanted to make him very like somewhat outrageous, And there's things that you can do. The one thing about working in video games, as opposed to like traditional media or legacy media at the time, is they're open to everything. You could do anything. I mean, it's just like the latitude that you have with it is just way, way more than you would ever have working like in television, for example, or I imagine features, because I did a little bit of work on features, but most of my work was in television. Mm-hmm. And so they were responding to it very well, and then, Joe wrote the production Bible for him and David Siller. David Siller did some of the technical stuff. Joe did pretty much all the literature and all the character descriptions and stuff. And Joe did all the backgrounds. Joe designed every single one of those backgrounds for the original Crash game. They were all his. And I was just doing, and I got a chance to do some original designs for Crash, like Aku Aku,
Ooh,
and
okay.
who's that guy, the Hawaiian guy?
Dingo Dial, correct? I think
No,
so.
Dingo Dog came later.
Oh, Dingo Dial again later.
Like Tana, I think.
Okay, okay.
The Tana who was originally called Carmen. He
Oh,
did
okay.
Pinstripe. He did who was that guy that was like he did pretty much did Neocortex, I was kind of like, I just basically worked off of did Neocortex off of what Joe had been doing. And there was a Embryo. There's a character called Embryo. Joe did
Right.
that. And I did a few things. I'm not sure exactly. I can't really remember. But it was fun. It was a lot of fun, and we had it was a lot of fun. It was like we knew they kept telling us this was going to be like a groundbreaking game, but we didn't really understand it, And it turned out this was an era when video games were this and this, but
Right.
this was the very beginning when it was this.
Right.
And we had technical limitations with it, like we had to, even though I was doing a character that could like fully animate, you could only have so many polygons, and so everything had to break down to like simple graphics, and that's how Crash came about, And we did everything that they wanted to do, and incidentally, that production Bible that Joe authored, and that I contributed artwork to, and David Siller contributed to, all that stuff, was published, I think, by Dark Horse Comics in 2017. I think it was 2017. It came out as a book after all those years. And I don't think it was my drawings that they had on the cover. It was full of Joe's stuff and my stuff. It was all Joe, and I don't think we ever got credit for authoring it.
That sucks. I'm.
I could have published the Bible, the Crash Bible, on my blog and on the internet, all that kind of stuff, and I could have done that years before, and you would have never seen that book come out. But I kept it confidential because I felt that it was something special. And then they went ahead and they published it, and which I think is okay because it makes us look good,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
That's what happened with it. So if you ever want to see the original production Bible, then you can purchase it. I'm sure it's someplace, Amazon
Right.
somewhere.
What was it a similar process for you, or were you a little bit more hands-on with the other mascot that you became very well known for, that Spyro the Dragon? How was the experience like, developing that character?
Well, I did something. I was kind of passive on Crash. I just kind of took a step back and let everybody do it. I remember like having meetings. Mark Cerny was there, and I think Mark was actually looking to me for input. And I just kind of took it back. I just kind of said, "Hey, like this is kind of like your thing." I should have said something, but I didn't know what to say. Because it's like it's your thing, guys. I mean, if I was to say something, it would probably change the entire trajectory of this thing. So I just kind of went along, and I just wanted to make sure that everything was that I could do what it was that they needed. And I think that my biggest contribution for Crash was, aside from making it animatable, was I made the character. I brought the characters to life. I brought the characters to life. It was like, this is Crash, and we know,
Mm-hmm.
we know what he's like. He isn't just a character a drawing sitting on a page. He's actually, you can look at him, you can see that, who he is and what he's all about. The difference between that and Spyro is, on the heels of Crash. Now, Insomniac Games and by this time, Naughty Dog had a studio they had their own studio. There's a big white building in the Universal Studios lot that I think it's the tech. I think I may be wrong. I think it's the Technicolor building.
Okay.
But like the first few floors are parking, and the top two floors are offices, and that's where Naughty Dog was. And right next to them was another studio, literally right next door, and that was Insomniac. And what Insomniac had done, they had done another video game that Universal picked up. I forgot what it was called, but they wanted to do a character-based game. They saw what was going on with Crash. They wanted to do a character-based game, and I guess that there was a good word about me from Naughty Dog. So Ted Price contacted me, and I talked with them, and we went over and we, negotiated a deal, and I went in, and and we didn't know, they didn't know what they wanted. They knew they wanted a dragon character, but they didn't know what. They just didn't know. So I spent the first day in a little office that they had, and I was drawing concept sketches of dragons, and I was making some of them big dragons, big lumbering dragons, grumpy dragons, goofy dragons, whatever. And we would have a conference, we would meet, and they would just we would talk about it. And I think at one point they said, I remember talking to them explaining to them about character appeal, design appeal, and how you can get, like the best ways to approach getting an appealing character. And what transpired from that was, let's do something that's cuter, and that's like more, like more, like the different, I hadn't done a cute one yet. Like everything was like torso dominant, body dominant.
Right.
And so I started doing some sketches, some cute dragons, and just started doodling them. I was using a marker and pens and stuff. And I came up with this one little character, this one little doodle. I said, that's it. That's him. So I showed, and then there was like a general consensus. Yeah, this is it. This is it. And so I started elaborating upon it. And I had Spyro after, I think it was like the middle of the second day, I had Spyro. So Spyro went very, very quickly. There weren't these extended meetings. There wasn't a lot of back and forth like there was with Naughty Dog. There wasn't a lot of people involved. It was me, and it was Ted, and there was another guy there named Craig Stitt, I think, who was the art director, Insomniac's art director. But I was working primarily with Ted, and he would take it, he would show it to other people, I guess either at Universal or whatever. And that's how we got Spyro, and then they said, like really, really push him, like then we started, okay, we know what he looks like. Now you want to make him, you want to bring him to life, you want to explore his behavior. And they said, like, really, really push him. We want him to be outrageous, one of these bratty little 8-year-old, And I started doing some more drawings, and then we had Spyro very, very quickly. And I got to tell you something, it was probably the dumbest thing one of the dumb things I had done in my life. Because I was being paid very well, but I was being paid per day.
Okay.
And if I'd have been a scoundrel, I would have like stretched this out for a couple of weeks. But I'm too my work ethic is too strong. And I wound up doing this Spyro in a very short period of time. And then we started doing other characters, like was it the orcs and all that kind of stuff and everything. It was a good experience. It was really, really, very positive, and it was very positive. But Spyro happened fast. And the one thing between the big difference between Spyro and Crash is like a kind of an amalgamation. It started with Joe, and then it's kind of like morphed into my take on that. But Spyro was 100% mine. It wasn't based on, I didn't have anybody else coming to me and say, make it look like this or do it, all that kind of stuff. And that is a big part of working in animation, folks, is, a lot of times, you're going to go to school, you develop your skills, you get really, really good. And then they hire you to basically like take stuff that's been already done and work, like they'll establish a look or something. And then you have to jump on that, and you have to kind of like, like adapt. You have to adapt to something that's already like, what's the word? They've already made decisions about it,
Right.
But Spyro was completely pure. It was pure character, and that's one of the things I just really appreciate about that. Was Spyro was 100% mine, and of course they modified it and all that kind of stuff and everything.
Yeah. And
of course, just like Crash, Spyro would change over the years, and that's completely, that just happens. The character evolves, but that's a big difference.
I mean, the fact that it's lasted for years, regardless, is a triumph on its own. I just wanted to ask one quick thing, because I've seen this on the internet here and there, and I don't know if this is something that you had direct hand in or whatnot. I know you said you developed Spyro very quickly. I've heard a rumor before that at one point Spyro was supposed to be a green dragon named Pete or Petey. Was that something that you had a hand in or whatnot? Or
I don't know about green.
Okay.
Because I didn't really have anything to do with this color. Most of the time it's just they just want me to color is not necessarily something that they want me to do.
Okay.
But it was called Project Pete.
Okay.
So they'll have like a code name for projects, and Spyro was called Project Pete, and Crash was originally called Willie the Wombat, but that wasn't a code name. They were actually going to call Willie was actually going to call the character Willie the Wombat. But I remember going to like a little like discount store, like a five and dime store in North Hollywood. While I, a little bit, just soon after I wrapped up my work, my initial work on Crash, and I remember seeing a little toy that was on a shelf someplace, and for whatever reason, I didn't get it. I don't know what I was thinking, but I remember I looked at this little toy, and it was just a little thing, little figure, and I looked at it, and I looked underneath it, and it said Willie the Wombat on it. And I said, and I called up and I left a message on Naughty Dog's voicemail. And I said, there's already a Willie the Wombat character, guys, so you might want to rethink the name. And that's what led to them changing the name. And I think very much for the better,
Yeah.
So I had nothing to do with that. I just remember seeing a Willie the Wombat toy, little figurine. I don't even remember what it looked like. And that was the end of Willie the Wombat,
Yeah. I
don't know how they came up with the name for Spyro. It was all internal stuff with Insomniac. You have to remember that I was not employed by them.
Right.
I was not employed by them. I was not even employed by Universal. I was contracted by Insomniac, and I was contracted by Naughty Dog, kind of like working almost you could say like a ghostwriter kind of thing, because they didn't have a design crew at that time. They didn't have anybody internally that could develop characters. And that's another thing that made Crash so unique. It was the very first time that they actually brought in professional, like animation development artists to develop a video game, as far as I know. That was the very first time. Today, man, video game artists are astounding. If you go to artstation.com and see the artwork, a lot of that is from the video game community from all over the world. It is just mind-blowingly good. But none of that existed in video games at the time. We were like the Neanderthals, like the very beginning of the emergence of all that stuff was with Crash, and also with Spyro. And then years later, all these guys started getting. They actually sent their design crew to me. Both, I think Naughty Dog did it twice, and Insomniac did it once, or maybe it was flipped. I don't know. But they sent when I first started my school, they sent their crews to me, and I started to train them in character design, and that's how they started to kind of like internally they started to get better, and they would hire like artists on the outside who were skilled and stuff. So
I mean, it's got to be amazing more than anything else. Like thinking that working on these projects one way or another, whether it's passive or more aggressive, like with Spyro and stuff, the legacy that these characters have, especially nowadays, it's got to blow your mind at this point. The fact that they've lasted this long.
Yes. It really did. I never had any idea that all these years later, they'd be like iconic, and it's great because I mean that, and you throw in He-Man and She-Ra, and those things, and I'm like an American Tale to a certain degree, and I can go anywhere. I can go anywhere. They don't know who I am, but I start talking to people and I tell them what I do and what I've done, and I'm like I have instant notoriety. instant. I can go anywhere in the little honky tonks and tiny little towns, and I wind up and they know what I've done, so that's a really great thing that, I don't do that very often. I just really I don't go around and say, hey, I did Crash. I don't do anything like that, but,
that's valid.
When it comes up in conversation, I eventually get into it, and then I play around with people, like I'll see Crash and Spyro like on Happy Meals, and I go into McDonald's, I buy a Happy Meal, and I just look at everybody, I just look at them, or I look at a kid, and I just look at him and I said, I did this. I did this. Like recently, what is it? God, there's an energy drink I forgot what
G Fuel.
that's it. That's it. So they came out with Crash and Spyro collector's cans. They came out over the summer, and you know, so I can go and I can say,
Yep.
I did that. It's mine.
So I'll say what's funny is only know that because the Crash Bandicoot Wamba fruit drink flavor and whatnot, I drink that here and there. So now I can say I have met a guest that made this possible one way or another.
It's really something else. It's really something. Yeah. It's one of the great things. I'm just very lucky. I'm a very, 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 very lucky, fortunate person, man. That's all it is. You know, I'm just very lucky. Just fate, destiny, whatever you want to call it. The universal something. It just worked out that way, and I'm just very fortunate. I'm very, very lucky because I have my own Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
See, I have my own Mickey Mouse. I've got, and not how many character designers can say that? How many characters can go out and say, like, you know, and I mean that metaphorically, of course.
Right,
you know?
right.
I have, you know, like there's Crash and Spyro. I have my own Mickey Mouses, you know, and you know, it just it makes it's very satisfying. It's very I think for everything I've been through in my career, it's kind of like a comforting, you know, it's kind of a reward, you know. So it's my reward for all the
yeah, absolutely. I mean, all
the foolish things that I've done, all the amazing, all the things that just I still haven't told you a lot of stuff, you know.
Oh, I can only imagine, and I'm kind of scared to dig deeper into that. I just wanted to say, at least, like, when it comes to the impact that obviously you've had, like, you know, even well before I knew about some of the stuff you're talking about, like, just thinking about the impact you've had with, like, Crash and Spyro, especially. I mean, Aiden right here can, if you want to tell him a little bit, like, Spyro is a major reason why you are the person you are today.
Yeah, I would say so, you know. And I really appreciate all what the fans do. I appreciate the fan art. I mean, I see people. I saw like these thighs. I don't know where it said. People see this stuff and they send it to me. Like yesterday, I got an email from a lady that I know that somebody had done a picture of Crash. You know, like because he's like super buffed. You know, and I see a picture of this girl. She's got like on her thigh. She's got a big tattoo of Crash on one side and a big tattoo of Spyro on the other one. And I see this other girl that did a gigantic crocheted Spyro, a big gigantic Spyro. And I just see this stuff and I'm like, I'm amazed. I'm just amazed. And you know, I don't know what to say. So I just don't know what to say. I'm happy that it turned out that way, and I'm happy that. But again, you know, I got to tell you, I got to give credit where credit is due. It's one thing to like design these characters, to come up with characters, but it would be meaningless if it wasn't for the geniuses. And I don't say that lightly. You know, I got like the geniuses at Naughty Dog and the geniuses at Insomniac. You know, the people that actually made the games. Just my involvement with it was really quite minimal. You know, I didn't really do anything other than maybe plant the seed, you know, and give it a little bit of water. But these guys actually nurtured the tree that came up out of that, and all the good things that have happened from it. And it's because of Naughty Dog, and it's because of Insomniac, and it's also because of studios like Toys for Bob, you know, that have done the very extremely extraordinarily talented people. So there's a limit to the credit that I get for that. You know, I appreciate the credit that I have received, but the success of the games is because of those guys, and not necessarily because of me. You know, so I just am enjoying. You know, I'm just like thanks a lot for everything that you did, because you guys made me look good. You know?
I mean, that is true. But I mean, even then, like with your metaphor, the fact that you planned to see, I mean, someone has to do it in the first place, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and Joe, but what I would have never have happened without Joe Pearson.
Right.
You know? Joe's a great artist. I mean, he did a music video for oh man, I could have figured it out. This guy's from Seattle.
Nirvana?
Pearl Jam.
You
know, it was called Evolution, I think.
Okay.
You know, just
Evolution,
maybe.
I
Yeah,
think I
he
know
did
the
that.
song you're talking about. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
he did the music, the animated music. He was great. He did a feature film. Joe did, I think, the very first animated feature film that was ever produced in Malaysia.
Oh, wow.
It was called something about War of the Worlds. War of the Worlds. What is it? War of the Worlds Goliath. I'm
Interesting.
sorry. There's just so much stuff that's going on at any given time that it's kind of tough for just for me to remember a lot of these titles. But War of the Worlds Goliath, and it was very very well. There was a feature film. I think it came out about 2014, and it was CG and hand drawn animation. He did a lot of really really great groundbreaking stuff. So if it wasn't for Joe, I wouldn't have had a chance to work on Crash, and if it wasn't for a lot of stuff, like the bad things that are happening to my life that put me in a position where a good thing where I could have, and kind of like had access to things that eventually became good,
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
And I mean, like, speaking of, planting seeds, obviously, like, you're also around that time are doing that with potentially the future of animation with starting up the Animation Academy in Burbank, California.
Mhm.
Now, I know you kind of said one of the ways you were able to help with the academy was giving people an experience by working on this pilot that you were talking about. But what was ultimately like the reason why you wanted to start the Animation Academy?
So I could finish that film.
Okay, yeah, understandable. It's a good.
Finish that film. It was I had the idea all the way back in like probably '89, I think,
Okay.
of having a school, starting a school, and then turning that school, like having as an offshoot from that a studio, like get students to come in, train the students, and then like why give them to the studios, like find a way to keep them, and we can do our own projects and stuff. I did that with the Animation Academy. As actually, I was teaching at a friend's school, and it was called Associates in Art
Okay.
in Sherman Oaks, California. And I think for one brief moment in time, it was the greatest art school perhaps in the world, because it was at the height of the animation boom in the '90s. And a friend of mine who I had very very enormous talent. These guys were like fine artists. There was a guy named Mark Westermo,
Okay.
and he died a few years ago. Um, but he started he started Associates in Art, and everybody was there. I mean, everybody. He started in the back of a lady's, like it was a lady that had like a small estate in Encino, and he was, he's psych. I was actually trying to get him to start a school with me a couple years before that,
Oh,
on the
wow.
heels of the embezzlement, because I had this building and there was nothing I could do with it. I said, like, let's move it, let's have a school. And I never heard back from him. So I guess he kind of like, went and he had been teaching. I had been teaching at different places and stuff. I met him in Calabasas, at a place called the California Art Institute, which is not the Cal Arts. It was a different school. And he was very good. He was like a figure drawing teacher and stuff. And I was teaching a class called animation design, which was the first of its kind, because by this time we had already, I think this was '85.
Okay.
But at this time, it was like I was teaching a class that where designing for animation had become the dominant thing at the studios, because everybody was sending their stuff overseas. So you really wasn't about, it was learning how to, if you're an illustrator, comic book artist, all that kind of stuff, there's a certain way of designing for animation. So I would teach you how to design characters, how to do your rotations, I mean, everything that you needed to do in order, on a professional, production level, with character design and also background design and stuff. And I kind of took the basis of that, and then I started teaching it. I was invited to teach at his school. I was like, he made me the head of the animation department, which really didn't mean anything, because I really wasn't able to do anything, and I really didn't have that much, like, let's say, authority or whatever. It was just kind of like just a title, but that brief time, that was really something. We had all these guys that were for all this. It was just like it was amazing. We had, like, you would have 40, 45 students in one class. I would get Paul Felix to come over and teach visual development. If you don't know who Paul Felix is, he's the brother of Philip J. Felix, the Felix brothers. There were three of them.
Oh wow.
And they're all great. Are they all? And by the way, when I left Hallmark and I got into the animation industry, I trailblazed for a whole bunch of people to come from Kansas City into animation, and they all became superstars. A bunch of them became superstars. They became, I mean it. I mean, they were just like, they became superstar status. And I remember sitting in the lunchroom in Hallmark, and Philip would be there, and there's another good friend of mine, very talented artist, Richard Chavez was there, a fellow by the name of Rich Lines. All of them, we got into animation. And I remember saying, you know, like, the day's going to come, guys, when we're going to be going to movie theaters, they're going to be seeing our names on the screen, you know. And you know, that's the kind of ambitions that at least I had, you know.
Right.
Son of a gun, it happened. It happened. Like Richard became the he was like the co-art director for he was one of the very first people hired at DreamWorks when
Oh
Katzenberg
wow.
moved away from Disney. He took 5 people with him to start DreamWorks, and Richard was one of them, and a great artist. I mean, he's just these guys I'm talking about. Their work belongs in some of the greatest museums in the world. They're just absolutely first world class artists. I'm telling you something, that the artists in animation are just, I can't say enough how fabulous they are, you know. And anyway, I was going to go off on that off of that. I can't remember what it was. Oh yeah. So anyway, one of the interesting things that happened when I was over at Associates in Art was I was looking at, you know, this is my early days in the internet, and I got on the internet on AOL, America Online, really early, and on a little 486 that I had for word processing, and I said, I got to get in on this and see what it is. And I would look at it and I would play around with it and all this kind of stuff. And back then, everything was like pages. It was all page stuff, you
Right.
know? And you didn't really see anything beyond that. Maybe a little bit of sparkling stuff here and there, and all that little animated, you know, GIF files or whatever. And I said, what's this going to be? What's this going to be? And then it hit me. And I went to my class later on, I think maybe that week, and I went to everybody, and I made this big announcement. And the announcement that I made was to my students was, everybody, this is what's coming. Everybody in the future, you're all going to have your own channels. You're all going to have your own TV stations. The internet is going to make is going to make everything else out there, just like digital production did to traditional production. It's going to make everything obsolete, absolutely everything obsolete. And you need to get ready for it. You need to prepare for it. And everybody's thinking at that time, well, what's it going to be? What are you talking about? Like 10 years from now, 20 years from now? I said, it's going to come sooner than you think, but this is the way to go. And it happened, you know? I mean, that's what I was seeing. I was seeing like, and I was encouraging my students, like, position yourselves for what's coming. And you know, so that evolved into, there was some stuff going on in Associates in Art. My friend was having some issues with some of the shareholders. I mean, I think I could have. I think I was, you know, I think I could have done a little bit better job, you know, of trying to make things work out, but it didn't work out. And I left, and I just wanted to take a break. And what had happened was, there was a student there that I had who had come into this inheritance, and he was talking to me about starting a school together. And I said, yeah, you know, like, how much money have you got? He's telling me how much money. I said, yeah, we could do with that. So we were talking back and forth, and, you know, it just, you know, I didn't want to be in a situation where I had a partner and I didn't control the business. You know, it's like, I want 51%. We're not going to, either you or I has to control this, has to be the dominant, you know, the leader in this, or it's not going to work. And I don't want to work under anybody else, you know, not in a situation like this. So it didn't work out. But there was a friend of mine who owned a restaurant in Burbank, and he was really intrigued by this. I was talking to him. I was talking with him. It's just he was intrigued. I was asking him for advice, all that kind of stuff. What should I do? All that. And after it fell apart, he comes to me. I was there, and he goes, so how's your school going? I said, it's not. It fell apart. And he goes, and he was a Greek man. You know, he goes, so Charles, do you need him? And I said, well, his money would have been nice. He goes, no. Do you need him? I said, no. He goes, well, I have an idea. This is how you could do it. And he had a back room. He had a back room to his restaurant where, like group parties and like you could reserve that room or whatever. It was like kind of like an overflow for the main restaurant. And he said, use my back room. You don't have to put anything up. Just pay me for the nights that you use it. And let's see how it goes. If it works, great. If it doesn't, you're not losing out on anything. I said, okay. So I went on that little 486 I was telling you about, and I printed out these invitations. And I had a Christmas card mailing list at the time. And it was about 35 people that were on it that I were either students of mine or people that I thought would be interested. And I printed out these invitations. And I remember I had like a hippo type character with a beret, and he had like a nose ring, and he was flipping like pages. He was flipping some animation, and these pages were going all over the place. And one page kind of like framed him on the bottom, and I had a very small, like typewriter lettering. Are you ready to kick some ass? Are you ready to kick ass? Or something like that. And then behind, I stapled that to another form, which was like a registration form and stuff. And I went to the post office, and I got $15 worth of stamps, and that's all I paid, And I just said, and I mailed them out. That's $15 on stamps and envelopes, and I mailed out 35 invitations. And I was talking to my friend, says, we'll do it if you get 5. Like if you get 5, do it. I thought, okay, all right, but I didn't. I said, I figured maybe we get about maybe somewhere between 5 and 10. I sold we had 20 seats available. I sold them all out. Sold all 20 seats. So I went and I think I charged $275 for the class at the time.
Okay, interesting.
So I spent $15 and I raised over $5,000.
Yep.
And that's how I started the Animation Academy. It was the students that became my financiers. And virtually every single student that I brought into that class had gotten into animation. Not all of them, but almost every single one. And we went from there, from that back room of the restaurant, like 2 blocks away was an office space in a building, nice little building. So I got that. And I was able to get tables and chairs. And then we got more students coming in. And then we could do it like every night of the week, and then expanded to another office opened up down the hall, and another office opened up. So I wound up taking all the office space that was available. So we had classes morning, noon, and night, and that's how the academy started. And yeah, I could go into more detail with that, but that's how I did it. I mean, I just did it. I did it with nothing. It just did it with nothing, and it changed the industry.
Yeah, no joke.
It changed the Animation Academy, changed the animation industry in ways that people can't even possibly imagine. The impact that we had on animation was amazing. It was amazing, and it was way more than just skin deep. We changed the core of the industry, and I think the peak of it, for me personally, the peak of it peaked out this spring. And I was driving through a little town that maybe had, I don't know, 800 or 900 people in it.
Mm-hmm.
It had this little movie theater from the silent movie era. You could look at it. It was just this is from a long, long time ago. But it was still active. And on the marquee, it said Super Mario Brothers on it. And I drove, it was one day before the movie opened. And as soon as I saw it, I said, that's it. Because the Super Mario Brothers movie, that became the biggest movie in the world. I think it grossed like more than 1.3 billion.
Yep.
It's the biggest movie of the year worldwide. And my student, Aaron Horvath, was the director of it. And he was there in the very early days of the Academy. He was there for a couple of years. And he was there at the heyday, when I think we reached like kind of like the pinnacle. It kind of happened early on, like within the first about 5 years of it. And then we maintained it, and then it just started to change and morph, and it's just started to kind of go off, and we had to keep changing the way we were doing things and stuff, because the animation was changing, things were changing, things were going on in my life. It wasn't possible to keep it going in the way it was at that time, but he was there, and I can't tell you the thrill that it gives me to know that. And he also did Teen Titans Go. He was a producer. Yep. Director for Teen Titans Go and a lot of stuff. So that's the kind of thing that happened out of the Academy, man. Like we were we were Mount Olympus.
I can tell. I mean, like judging by just that, the fact that you've recently celebrated 25 years of the Academy at this point,
Right.
being
Yeah.
able to do so much and influence so many people, like you talk about Aaron, another one that I noticed as well, David Gimmel, who had a major hand with the Looney Tunes cartoons and such. Well,
I stay in regular touch with David. John Nevada's was there. He was already in the industry. He was always really he was very he was there. He went on to Pixar, and we
okay,
Steven Silver was there, who a lot of people know him from Kim Possible, and he became he got his teaching start at the Academy, and he was also my student when I teach at Associates in Art. That's why I first met him, and he went on to have a very great career. He's published a lot of books. He's a great teacher in his own right. He's really quite good at very, very motivated. He's a super talented artist. Chance Raspberry, who went on to The Simpsons for a long time, and then became like the real kind of an expert in Facebook marketing, for projects and stuff. He was there, and Jose Lopez was there. He did. Lorelei Beauvais was there. She went on to Disney, like one of Disney's top. She did. I think she was involved with Tangled, and visual development artists, a very high level. I could go on and on and on. Kelsey Mann was there. He went on to Pixar. Walter Gaddis. I know I'm missing. Snake by Cortez. I met a lot of people that I wish I could. I'm kind of sorry I'm missing some names. I know I'm missing a few, but
I mean, the fact that you have a list of incredible alumni that have come and gone through there, and I mean, like I said, the legacy, the fact that it's lasted 25 years at this point, which for some places they'd be lucky if they can get past like just a couple years, like with some of the ways that they're teaching stuff. Like it's gotta, I imagine it has to amaze you just how far along you've been able to come along with the Academy.
Yes, but it was brutal.
Oh, I imagine
it was brutal. It was like riding like trying to bust a wild bull. Not a bronco, but a bull that just wanted to continuously kick you off. And I held on all the way through. It was not easy. And I have to tell you something. If I had to go back and do it again, I probably wouldn't.
Oh wow!
I probably wouldn't do it. I didn't realize what I was getting in store. I didn't realize what I was getting. It was work, man. It's work.
Right.
It's work. And I'm running in 2000. I was running the school during the day, having classes at night, and then for an entire year, in the middle of the night, from about midnight to about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, I was developing Jak and Daxter.
Goodness.
I was like chronically sleep deprived. It was just, it was really very, very difficult during many times. And then I was dealing with all sorts of other things that people don't even realize, that people don't even know. Like like illnesses in the family.
Yeah.
And deaths in the family, and my own quirks and all that kind of stuff, And I also started a movement in animation through the Academy called Animation Nation, and it was the very first time that the animation industry had a social media. It was in the days of message boards.
Right.
This was way before Facebook. Way before anything like that, and I would organize these walkouts of the industry on April Fool's Day of every year, and I would spend my own money getting like a big banquet hall, and getting food and drinks for everybody, mostly food, and inviting, and the way that it started was very unique and subversive because I saw things happening in animation after the boom that I felt really strongly about it. And I had these encounters with some people from the union. And I said, okay, you guys want a revolution, I'll start a revolution, but you guys better back me up, man, because if you don't, I'm going to turn it on you. You don't leave me high and dry on this, So I had some meetings with the president of the union and stuff, and they just said, well, there's nothing we can do. You're on your own. This is going to be a grassroots thing because we have a no strike clause in our contract, and this might be seen as a strike and stuff. So I had to do it on my own, and with students there. So I created these little tabs, these little pieces of paper that had in a military stencil style, 4.1, and about a few weeks before this, I gave it to my students. I put these things, take them to the studios, take them wherever, put them in break areas, put them on your friends' chairs when they're not in their booths and all that stuff. Put it in, tape it on bathroom mirrors and all that stuff. And nobody knew what 4.1 meant. And 2 weeks later, I came out with the second wave, and it was animationnation.com, April 1st, 2000, and April 1st, of that year, which was 1999, actually.
Okay.
What I had done was I had started a website, and I had published a series of articles in February of 1999, and that really caught on. And it was kind of like almost like Martin Luther, with his 99 points or something, like that nailed to the door of the church, and I forgot what city in Germany. It was something like that.
Yep.
And then we provided a message board for everybody to communicate, and we were intent on. I was intent on reforming the industry, and I those articles are still up there someplace. Now Animation Nation is just a blog that I post one day a year on February 25th every year, basically saying, "Hey guys, I hope you're all doing really good. I told you so." I told you this was going to be and the first meeting was awesome. We had like a couple hundred people there, and it was just real rough and real tough. We had an open mic, and it was at the Sportsman's Lodge in Studio City. We had all sorts of people there, and we were just going back and forth. And I remember one guy. That's why I met Snakebite Cortez, who's a great comic book colorist. He's a great artist, a great, one of the many great artists that we had. And he's up there at the microphone saying, hey, he was trying to explain to everybody like what MP3 technology was, and I'm up there saying, hey, everybody, broadband is coming. This is the day, you got to remember, this is the days of dial-up. I'm saying broadband's coming. We're going to work, just, and I was basically saying the road to the future is independence.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to find salvation at the studios. You're not going to find the future at the studios. You're going to find it. And I was telling people around that time, not necessarily at that meeting, but I was saying in the future, independent artists are going to be making more money than you studio guys. And I was laughed at, and I was scorned, and I was just, you crazy, all that stuff. And then guess what happened?
Yep.
One day I saw a girl on her Patreon page named Sakimi Chan.
Okay.
On Patreon. And she was doing fabulous, incredible work, and she was making a fortune.
Dang. Yeah.
Her work is not something that I could, it's, adult oriented, and I could not share that with like my younger students and stuff. But I would say, look at that. And my heroes today are all these people that are doing stuff on their own to become like wildly successful. And I know they've worked very, very hard for that, Sakimi Chan is one. Another one that's a really recent one. Yeah, she's been working on this. She's been doing Lackadaisy.
Yes, Lackadaisy.
And she came out with a wonderful animated pilot. And who else? The girl that did Has Been Hotel.
Yep. Vivzy Pop or Vivian Madrano.
Right. That's not necessarily my thing as far as what she does, but I have a great deal of respect for what she accomplished. It's great. It's really, really good. And another one that just came out, not even 2 weeks ago, I think. It's like the Amazing Animated Circus.
Amazing Digital Circus, yes.
That's extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. This is what's happening. These are the people that are on the frontier of animation. Okay.
Absolutely.
Along with all sorts of other people who, Aaron Blaise, the director from Disney, great artist, great animator. He was a director of Brother Bear. Aaron Blaise he's a major influencer in animation because he went off on his own. He's doing his own thing, and he's fabulous. He's fabulous. And you have all these people that are doing these things. And I don't mean to put down anybody at the studios. I know that they're doing marvelous work there, but the real groundbreaking stuff is being done by these people, and that's the ones that's the community that interests me.
No, absolutely.
That's the thing that I'm interested in what it is that they're doing, and amazed at what they're doing. And another thing that really is astonishing is they're all doing it. It seems to me that they're all doing this using remote production.
Yes.
They don't even have a studio location. They're just working out of their homes, wherever they happen to be, and they're doing all this amazing content.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening today. And it's thrilling. and I'm more excited than anybody else about it because I remember, as I said, I may have said before, I remember the old days.
Yep.
I remember the old days when it was impossible to do anything like that. It was impossible. I mean, something came out in 1985, I think, and it was Don Bluth did a teaser trailer for a project called Jawbreaker, and you can go on YouTube and you can find this. And it's maybe about a minute and a half long, but Jawbreaker at that time was like a big deal. It was a big deal. And I remember one time somebody came into the studio, I think it was Deke, and they had a video cassette and they put in and they played. So we got like a look at Jawbreaker, and it was just, like you had to like take out a second mortgage on your home to do something like that. It costs, like $150,000 to do something like that back then. And now you can, for everything that was involved with that, you have literally in the palm of your hands. You have the multi-plane camera that's gone obsolete. You have the ink and paint services that have gone obsolete. You have the Xerox services that have gone obsolete. And wait till Dreams comes out. Wait till Procreate Dreams comes out. Procreate Dreams is coming out November 22nd. And Aiden, you should be particularly interested in this because the company that is creating it, Procreate, is from Tasmania. Okay. And I forgot what they're called, Savage Interactive or something. And they're coming out, and when Procreate Dreams, I'm just telling you from what I'm seeing, of course, I have to reserve my review of it until I actually see it. But Procreate Dreams is going to change. I feel it has the potential to change animation forever, because it's an app that you will have on your iPad, and you can make in theory you can make animated films that have a resolution high enough to where they can be screened on a movie theater on your iPad, on an iPad app.
It's insane to think
about.
And
you can edit with Procreate Dreams. So I'm telling everybody that I'm working with, I'm actually doing that. I'm actually like, let me get all this stuff ready because I want to get all this stuff out of the way and taken care of. Because when November 22nd comes around, I want to get Procreate Dreams, and I'm going to use that to pick up with what it is that I've been doing with this other stuff. So It's a very, very exciting time in animation. It just absolutely is. And I just can't stop talking about it to anybody who will listen.
Good. Yeah, and, trust me, we're all ears for it. I was gonna say, like, you were talking about all the independent animation stuff. I mean, I interview a lot of people that work in that field. I interview a lot of people that take the time either creating their own stuff or working alongside some of these independent creators, like Viv or like Lackadaisy Tracy and all that stuff like that. I said it at the beginning of when we were starting out, but I'm currently helping the other person that helps me out with the podcast, Tipsy J Hearts. We're currently doing an Indiegogo right now to try to raise funds for a adult animated a horror comedy that she has produced about a demon goat. Like it's a little demon goat that a demon.
Oh, wait a minute! I've seen this.
You see?
The
what?
What's it called?
The Evil Little Thing.
Oh, I think it might be. I think I've seen it. I've seen something. That's like a ram or a goat or something. If you could show,
I was gonna say, does this?
No, it's not that, but it's something that I'm familiar with. That's somewhat similar to it, but I think that's fantastic, man.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, it's a project that she has held near and dear for years, and this is something that, like, I'm helping out with the writing. We've got a good skeleton crew helping out right now. We got some good voice actors on board. We're just trying to raise funds so we can pay those people and such, and like really go forth and make this a reality, because like the ideas that we're already brewing right now is going to be exciting. And like just hearing the excitement that you have about all this independent animation, like I cannot tell you how exciting it is to hear. I mean, especially hearing your experience or whatnot, thinking about what the future could potentially hold, and the fact that you're also helping foster that in a little bit with the Animation Academy. Like, I have to ask, like, just as a whole, thinking back through your entire art journey from when you first started off, obviously, like, just really getting familiar with the cartoons, like, the classic, Rocky and Bullwinkle, Hanna-Barbera stuff, to being in the industry and the experience you had there, to what you're doing nowadays, fostering it in. Does it amaze you how far you've been able to come along on this art journey?
I don't really think about it much. I think about it sometimes, but I got to tell you the truth. And in many ways, I feel like I'm just getting started.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what it is. It's really weird because I'm quite old. I'm like really, really pretty. I'm up there. And but I just feel like that was one thing, you know? Uh like that was one thing that was like, and I'm entering into something different now. And I like it. I like it. I like I'm entering into this kind of a period that I'm kind of seeing, I'm kind of defining as an authorship era.
Okay.
And this is something that I teach my students. I really encourage my students to think this way. Don't think just in terms of like working for other people or working, like I see things in two different ways. So you could go with your art and with your skills and with your career, you could go into like a service oriented direction, like you're doing you're like you're doing you're working for you're picking up work from freelance or studio work, all that kind of stuff. It's not stuff that you're necessarily creating for yourself. It's just you're helping other people and other people, like institutions, whatever the thing is with what it is that they're doing. And then you could have this other thing where you're doing your own material, you're creating your own content, you're creating your own properties, and I've always encouraged that because I think that's necessary, especially today, because your studio gig is not going to take care of you through. I don't. For the most part, I feel that your studio gig is not going to carry you through. It's going to get to the point where you're eventually not going to be cool. They're going to let you go. It just reaches a point where, not with everybody. I know some people have done really well working the studio, and some people who work very well doing like working. Hey, I like to work. I like to be hired or contracted to do what I like to be hired. But there's a whole another area that I feel is very just as important and probably even more important, and that is intellectual property creation and intellectual property ownership, and that is tied in with authoring, with authorship. So what I do with my students nowadays is I take like newcomers to the academy and stuff, and I have other people that are set up to take on beginners and this and that. So what I do is I work with students who I've had before, or people who I feel are advanced enough where I can work with them in a realistic way, where I don't have to go and like get into the minutia of stuff. Like you have to watch for this and watch for that, all these kind of little things that go along with the basics. And I'm working with them on their projects. So I work with them to help them develop, to help them to author, and they're coming up with some really interesting things. Like our community is coming up with some really interesting projects, and I think that I would recommend, I would have people, encourage people to think that way, because I just feel that's the way things are going. Just like in your own situation where you've got you're doing crowdfunding to get move your project along and get your own team together and all that kind of stuff. I think that's I think it's a smart thing to do. And I talk with investors and venture capitalists and all that kind of stuff, and I kind of tell them, I'm at that point, like, forget it, guys, like, forget it. I mean, it doesn't cost, Procreate Dreams is going to cost $20.
Yeah, that's
You're not, it's a one-time payment of $20. You're not going to have to pay monthly license fees like you have to do with Toon Boom and other, stuff like that, although Toon Boom is industry standard, and there's a lot of very, very positive things that you could do with it. But it just doesn't cost that much. I mean, you don't have to. There's no overhead, and that's what I explain. When I explain to people who want to come into animation as like financially underwrite a project and stuff, and I just say it doesn't. You don't need millions and millions of dollars, man. You don't need $50 million. And, half of that is spent on. You're wasted. It's just wasted. The highest paid people on your payroll are going to be your management people, executives you don't really need. You just don't need them. You don't need to have an elaborate studio. You just don't need that anymore.
Right.
I mean, if you want to have that, that's great. But you just want to spend your money on put into content, and even or on equipment. Here's an interesting thing that I was thinking about. I think about this a lot, and I even talk about this with some people. It's like you want to work at like a major studio, and they tell you we have to have a degree, and they like coerce you maybe into going into these extremely high priced schools that cost like a fortune, an absolute fortune to go there. And I'm going like, guys, do you want to really start your career off being like massively in debt? Do you want to, and I know that there are a lot of people that are dealing with this right now. And I'm just saying, it shouldn't be this way. You shouldn't have to mortgage your entire life in order for you to be able to creatively participate in animation, in the animation medium. That's just I feel very strongly about that. And that's one of the reasons why I started the Academy was, my whole philosophy behind it was affordable education. And a lot of times people were turned off by the fact that I'm not charging you $50,000 to go there. I was just, they would call me, do you have financing? I said, yes, we do. It's called your credit card, Get your credit card out and just, it's not going to cost that much money. And I guarantee you're going to learn more in one term with us than you did in 4 years of your art school or whatever. And a lot of times my students had degrees and they still didn't learn what they needed to learn. I mean, you got to learn the basic stuff is really not that difficult to kind of, mentally comprehend. It's just the application of it is what, causes, is what takes time. So I'm saying, okay, let's say you're going to spend $100,000 on your education. Okay. What kind of equipment can you get for that? What kind of equipment can you get for $100,000 or $50,000 or $30,000? What kind of equipment can you get with that? And if you are going to go to school like that, then, and I know I was part of an animation educators forum, and I'd read what these college professors were going back all over the world, what they're going back for. And it was all about get your demo reel together so that you could get a job at a studio. The studios want to see this studio. What the hell with the studios, man? Yeah. All my friends that I talk to from the studios are miserable. And I have to listen to it. I just tell them, man, I told you when you were getting into the industry, there's a reality to it. And I told you this is what it's like.
Right.
I don't want to hear it anymore. Either do something, either shut up or do something about it.
Exactly.
Just deal with it, man. Just deal with it, So anyway, if you're going to go to school, think more like a business person instead of an employee. Okay. Don't think just in terms of like, I want to be employed here and there. And even if you do, use it to help to build out your potential business. And that is go to school and think in terms of, okay, I'm renting their equipment. I'm renting this. I'm doing that. I'm using their facility to create my situation, to create my own studio. Okay. And just don't think in terms of like, there's an artist that I know, and I'm sure you would recognize his name if I told you, but he's got a friend. So it's a friend of a friend kind of thing. Okay. And this guy was an animator who was doing commercial work. So the advertising agency was coming to him and giving him all this work and stuff, and he was doing fine with it. Like, I think I'm going to guess he's like getting maybe like $10,000, $15,000 for maybe a few seconds of work and stuff like that, like think in terms of, I don't know if it was for like Red Bull or anything like that, but it was for stuff like that,
Okay.
And then somehow this guy found out what the advertising agency was getting. And they were getting 10 times that amount of money. They weren't getting $15,000. They were getting $150,000. And they were getting a small percentage of that to the animator. And I don't know how this guy pulled it off. But I confirmed it with my friend not that long ago. Okay. I don't know how he pulled it off. But what that guy did was he found a way to get around them and deal directly with the client.
Okay.
He was getting all that money. And that guy, after his first year, as I understand it, tallied up all his invoices, and he did more than $1 million worth of business
There you go.
Now you show me anybody working in an animation studio today that's an artist is getting anything close to that. Okay. And the last I heard, the guy had bought like 5 houses. This is a true story, according to what my friend told me. I don't mean to be, I don't want to get into, because I want to, like double check my sources and all that kind of stuff. But this is what I was told by somebody who is a very big name in the animation industry, So think in those terms, folks. Think in those terms, and you have to, because of the way that the way that things are developing, okay, is you need to think in terms of, don't just think in terms of being an employee, think in terms of your own, forge your own future, forge your own destiny. And by all means, this is a business that you could be very successful in, but you've really got to be good.
Yeah.
You've got to be good. It's super competitive out there, and you've got to be good. And I impress upon you over and over and over again the importance of fundamentals in animation, the importance of it, the importance of good basic draftsmanship,
absolutely,
good basic drawing skills, good composition, good good storytelling. Just the foundation of it all is fundamentals. And the art director of The Lion King, I was at an event a few years ago in Burbank, and he was there, and I knew what he was going to say. But for the benefit of everybody else who was there, I went to him and I said, what was his name? Andy Gaskell, was it? I don't know what his name was. I can't remember. I'm sorry. I just, this just escapes me. And I went to him and I said, I encourage my students all the time. I really, remind them of the importance of fundamentals in as far as, just mastering the fundamentals, artistic fundamentals, as they apply to animation. What would you have to say about that? If there was something you could tell them, a message I could take along, that what you have to say about all that. And he said, and I quote, "It is essential." End of quote. It is essential. What I'm talking about is essential. So don't settle for just like you're less than your best.
Mm-hmm.
You must be great. You must be the best of the best of the best of the best. And it's not something that happens in a month, in a week, in a month, in a year. It's a lifelong journey. I'm still learning. I'm still evolving. I'm still growing. And I look at my artwork from, like years ago, and I look at it, just said, man, I can't believe my style, how much my style has changed.
Right.
And you know what? I mean, we haven't talked about this very much, but I just want to hit on it before we, I don't know how much longer we're going to go on, but I didn't talk about Jak and Daxter.
Okay. Jak
and Daxter was a groundbreaking game. It was a groundbreaking project, let's say. It was called Project Y. And it was groundbreaking, absolutely groundbreaking, because this was at the advent of PlayStation 2. Naughty Dog, this was at the end of 99. Mm-hmm. And I have been running the Academy for about getting close to 2 years now. And by this time, I had a 6,000 square foot, I don't know how many meters, it was just about 6,000 square feet of space, about a block away from Warner Brothers. And it had gone from the restaurant to this, and actually Don Bluth was there. It was a building that Don Bluth was there, and I found that he did a movie called Rockadoodle, part of Rockadoodle was there, okay? I was working with Naughty Dog, and Bob Raffi. I didn't mention Bob Raffi because he's also a very great artist. That he was the art director for the studio back then, and I remember him mentioning it. We were talking and stuff, and then we had Jason and Andy and Bob. I think it was maybe Mark Cerny was there. I don't know. They came to Burbank and we went out for dinner. We were talking about stuff, and they had a new project they were going to be doing, and it was a good positive meeting, and we that was like they wanted me to work with them again, which I was completely open to that, because I had done Crash 1, I had done Crash 2, I had done Crash 3, mm-hmm. And which I didn't even get into Crash 2 or Crash 3 yet, but that was really a lot of fun working on those games. So anyway, and what happened was I wound up negotiating a real groundbreaking deal. And I want to talk about this a little bit because I think that it can be beneficial to artists, especially if you're just starting out, and it can encourage you. because everything that you do in when you're working for other people is all work for hire, you know, and that means that they own everything that you do, and it's all, you know, like it's just, you know, like whatever content you create, they own, um, you know, all that kind of stuff and everything. And I just was told them, like, it's not going to be the same kind of deal, you know, just whatever. And what happened was we negotiated a deal, and they negotiated a year-long contract, and it's very I love to tell this story, and I don't know, maybe these guys see it somewhere down the line and stuff, and I have nothing but respect for, you know, but they didn't play this well, you know, they didn't play it well, and I'll tell you why. Because they made an initial offer to me,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, I'll think about it for a day, and I didn't call him back that day. And the person I was talking to was Mark Cerny. And Mark Cerny at that time, I believe he was the president of Universal Interactive, or whatever. They had broken away from Universal at this time, and they
Okay.
were working directly with Sony. So they had to, you know, like, and this was going to be a big deal, because this is going to be the first time where they're on their own, they're working directly with Sony. This is like a major thing. And he makes me an offer, and I didn't move on it. He said, I'll think about it. So, you know, I was just playing it cool. And I said, it was okay. It was all right, you know? So he calls me, like the day after. He goes, yeah, I said, hey, Mark, how you doing? Hey, Charles, did you think about it? And I said, yeah, I thought about it. He goes, well, what do you say? And I said, and I stopped for a minute, and I paused, and I took a deep breath, and I was about to say, okay. And then he says, we'll double it.
Oh.
Okay. Before I could say, he says we double it right before, and I there we go twice the money right there. Okay, so then we started talking more, and then I just started saying, but there's certain things that when I negotiate a deal, there's certain things that I get, and one of them is the ownership of my original art.
Okay.
I negotiate that deal. I negotiated that with Spyro. It actually goes back to when I was working on He-Man, because on He-Man, I don't know, who knows. I think they threw away a lot of that art and stuff. I don't really know, but I was saying, like, I'm liberating the art. That's why the way I was putting it. It's like I went to my supervisor, told him, may I have, after you're done using it, may I take the drawings back and stuff? And she had no problem with it. So I have a bunch of stuff from He-Man, the original development stuff from He-Man and Shura, that again, like very few people have ever seen. And that's one of the things I have to get to before, you know, while I'm still on this earth, you know.
Right.
But I do that periodically, and then I did that with Jak and Daxter, and I also negotiated royalties, and they agreed to it, you know, and that is a no-no. That doesn't happen at all. They don't want to give royalties to artists, no way, shape, or form, no how. That is an absolute deal breaker. And that's another reason why I say that you need to develop your own projects, guys, because when you develop your own projects and you establish your own property, then you're in a much better position to negotiate stuff like that. But he negotiated it, and basically what they said was, he got back to me, and the lawyer was as I understand, the lawyer was so upset because they didn't want to set this precedent. You know, they didn't want to set it. And I said, you know, they said they lit somewhat. The way I understood it was, it's going to take you years to get these royalties. You know how it is in Hollywood. Basically, it's like, hey, you're going to, like, you know, you're never going to see it, is what they're saying. So why don't we do this? Why don't we, you know, we'll buy the rights to the royalties from you. So they doubled it again.
Oh.
So I'm making 4 times the amount of money on Jak and Daxter that I was originally going to agree to. Okay. And that's what a little bit of finesse can do. And then I said to them, since I agreed to it, because I knew it was just, you know, like, I didn't want to blow it. You know, I didn't want to insist on all that stuff. So, and I really wanted to really want to work with these guys again. But I went to them, I said, but I got the rights to I got royalties, right? Yes. And you bought the rights to the royalties from me, right? Right. Which means I got royalties, right? Right. So I got royalties. Good. I got royalties to Jak and Daxter. And if I can get royalties, then you guys and other people can get that too, you know? But I think, you know, that's extremely difficult to do. And almost never, ever happens. I think in certain cases it might, but I don't know what the details of it are. But I started working on Jak and Daxter, and we didn't know what we were going to do. They didn't have any idea. we just started from total scratch. And I remember I was working at the beginning, I was working with Mark Cerny. Mark goes, start draw gremlins. I said, okay, I just started drawing gremlins. So I started doodling and, and I was just throwing this stuff out, just throwing it out, And then they started to say, okay, we like this. They were actually selling this stuff, sharing it with Sony at the beginning. And some of the decisions that Sony was making, Naughty Dog didn't want. So they stopped doing that. And it just became like an internal thing. And then they would show Sony after the fact. Okay, after they saw things that they liked, they would show it to Sony to get their input. I'm assuming that was the case, but Jak and Daxter was kind of like a piecemeal thing. Okay, we'll take these foot wrappings, and we'll take this sash, and we'll take these buckles and all that kind of stuff and everything. We started to kind of like put it together that way. And one of the things that I was kind of struggling with at the beginning was I didn't really know. I was thinking of designing this like the original PlayStation. I really didn't know what PlayStation 2 was about. And, at one point, I was talking at this point, I was talking with Bob Raffi, and he explained to me. I finally understood it when we had this one conversation. I finally understood what he was talking about, because I just didn't know what they were talking about. I said, you're not explaining it to me in a way that I can understand. And then he finally did. And what I realized was that, we were going from 500 polygons to 10,000. So we had 20 times the resolution. So in other words, I wasn't just drawing simple characters and this and that and everything that was relatively flat. I had to sculpt them. I had to give them like girth. I had to give it thickness. I had to give it girth. So that's what I started doing. And it changed my drawing style. And to this day, I would have to say to this day, I still draw. I'm profoundly influenced by the work that I did on Jak and Daxter in that year. And I worked on it for an entire year. Along what I was talking about earlier, it was a really brutal year. But I endured it for a whole 12 months to the day. And I did 603 pages. And almost every single solitary page I did was drawn in the middle of the night. And I would have the work by 4:30 in the morning. I'd wrap it up. I think I scanned the drawings, and then I Xerox the drawing, and I would scan it so I wouldn't like smear any of the pencil or anything. I was drawing mostly in blue pencil and black line, and I had to make sure that they could have it in the morning. And I did this almost like 5 days a week. There were days I was just too tired. I just really can't do it. But I did this, and Jak and Daxter turned out to be a really great game. And it won Daxter, which is a character that I designed. Okay, I mean, they were doing some things internally that I saw some of their initial sketches, and it was like, there's no way, guys. It took me about 83 versions of doing that character before we finally hit on it. And it was just 83. You tried doing that, like over and over and over, just trying to, at one time he was a monkey, at one time it was this, at one time all that stuff. And then he turned out to be, and it was just, I finally nailed him. And Daxter wound up winning the best original character of the year at the Game Developers Conference for that year, which is the equivalent of getting an Oscar. And that was Naughty Dog's first award, was for Daxter, the character of Daxter. And I would say, and there was some confusion there because the word got out that I helped to, tweak the character side, and it was nothing of the sort. I designed that character from scratch, and it was another highlight of my career. And that, of course, was due primarily to Naughty Dog, because they made the character. They did such a great job animating the character. So
yeah,
that's what happened. That was, I wanted to kind of explain that with Jak and Daxter, because you guys don't necessarily have to settle for the first thing that they throw out at you. Sometimes you do. They're not going to leave you a choice. But as you progress with your career, you can be a little bit more flexible and stuff. And I would say, if you want to go the direction that I did with Jak and Daxter, you would have to either spend a lot of time like working on building your own personal legacy, let's say, or you could just develop your own project and make it popular, and then when they come knocking on your door, you could get a better deal than just work for hire. So
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
right.
As we start to wind down the interview, Charles, I just have one last question I want to ask, honestly.
Sure.
Obviously, like I said with the previous question, you've been deeply entrenched in art for years, for ages at this point. In your opinion, how important is art, not just for you, but for the world as a whole?
It's indispensable. It's absolutely indispensable. It's the definition of humankind, you know?
Yep.
It's, I tell people like art is everything, like, the headset that you got on,
Mm-hmm.
where did it start? It started with, like sketch. It started with schematic, like the chair you're sitting in, everything, just everything starts with design. Everything starts with art. Everything starts with the manifestation of the concept, it's indispensable. So I don't know what people are talking about when they try and trivialize it. It's like, I mean, look back in, interesting thing, because the oldest piece of art that I think archaeologists have been able to dig up comes from a cave in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually a piece of yellow ochre, I mean, red ochre, sorry, piece of red ochre that it's flat. You could tell like it was like rubbed on something, and they would mix it with animal fat, and decorate their bodies with it. Maybe for, aesthetic purposes, maybe to kind of keep the sun off their skin. I don't really know. But it eventually, I'm sure it evolved for, like decoration, personal decoration, adornment. And that little chunk of red ochre had a graphic design on it that is dated to about 72,000 years ago, and you can start to see the emergence of art as maybe like as a sign of like personal ownership of something, or maybe like like to keep track of something, or even maybe to like in a crude way of like mapping, coming up with a map or whatever. And then you get into the whole, the cave paintings and all that kind of stuff and everything, which are absolutely extraordinary. And then you get into like stuff like the Venus of Willendorf, if you've ever seen that, this really buxomy woman who's, I can't tell if it's her hair or if she's like wearing a knit cap over her head. She's got just these like a gigantic ass, and she's just like gigantic. She's just gigantic.
Right, right.
You see that over and over and over during that time period in all these different locations in Europe. And then that last, and the change that happened in art was extremely slow. I mean, you're talking about like you have the Venus of Willendorf, and they're still making similar, like little, figurines 20,000 years later. So art is just it's an expression of humanity. I mean, that's what it's just there's no way you can get around it, and today in our modern times, it's like, and it's becoming even more with modern media and all that kind of stuff. It's becoming like ubiquitous. It's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And like look at your wall.
Yeah.
Know?
Trust me, I can see my wall.
Look at your wall, guys. So I just think that it's a, like when you're working as an artist, like as an artist or an artisan, a craftsperson, anything like that, the higher you take it, the higher you take it as far as just the execution of it is concerned, the more attention you're going to get. And you can't, people are inexplicably attracted to it, and that's one of the things that I teach is like, okay, you can come up, there's ways to make, how can you apply this cerebral thing to, like the science of vision, like the physical act of looking at things, and there's ways that you can take art and you can make it even more appealing. You could just, and that a big thing that I like is design appeal. Like if you want a really good looking character, there's certain things that you can do that can make like a strong character even better by just, and people will be attracted to it, and they don't even know why. They can't even explain it. So, yeah, it's just something that, You know, it's in everybody's life, whether you're a farmer or whether you're an engineer or whether you're you know, an accountant.
Yep.
You know, it's just it's everywhere, and it's something that should be embraced. And don't listen to people that are discouraging you from doing it. You know, I mean, be realistic about it. I mean, you know, like if you know, just be realistic about your art career. And you know, sometimes you have to do other things before you can get to a point where you can actually like manifest that career or have, you know, like revenue coming in from it and stuff like that. But I guarantee you that the more you do it, the more you apply yourself, um, it's going to happen for you. You know, it's just but you have to really, you know, you have to have a love for it. And it's like anything else. You have to really you have to apply yourself. You have to work hard. You know, there's no getting around it. I mean, you know, look what lawyers have to do. You know, look what doctors have to do. Look what, you know, all these extremely skilled people have to do. And art, you know, especially in animation, you have an equivalent. It's a very high level skill. It's a very extremely specialized skill, and it takes devotion, and it takes dedication, it takes perseverance, and sometimes, and the other thing too is that I tell people is like, sometimes if you have the spirit inside of you, like Robert Henri, I think like maybe in the 19th century wrote a book called The Art Spirit. I didn't read the whole thing, but I just read, you know, parts of it here and there. And I'm saying, if you have that inside of you, then there's nothing you can do about it, because it will just consume you. You know, like you keep me away from doing creative things, and I'm miserable. I'm just absolutely just like, I become a dysfunctional person. You know, I get angry. I get like, you know, I get really just, you know, get away from me, leave me alone, you know, and it affects my relationships, because people who don't have that, you just don't understand it. They don't understand. But if you have that, there's nothing you can do about it. You have to follow that. You have to follow the calling, you know. I hope that's helpful. You know, I don't know if I explained it well, but you know, just it's helpful.
I think it has been very helpful, and I think it is wonderfully worded, if I do say so myself. Eloquently worded, if I do say so myself. That is all the questions that we have for you, Charles. I've already showered you with a bunch of praise, but I want to share with you a little bit more because it's my podcast. I do what I want. Aiden, do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first? Okay, I guess I'll go.
No, sorry, I pressed my Discord keybind again because I'm an idiot. I just wanted to say thank you for just inspiring me and a ton of other artists. If it wasn't for you just designing and practically making Spyro, I wouldn't be doing art as a whole. Because for my entire life, Spyro has just been there and has been inspiring me to become an artist and just being a character designer at this point. And I honestly just don't know what to say other than just thank you. The way that you designed him was just absolutely fucking perfect.
Thank you.
And especially like the little sketches that I've seen of him that you've made, I just love it. He just looks so awesome. And I wish I could like one day replicate how you made those characters look as iconic as they do. So fuck, thank you. Like genuinely from the bottom of my heart.
You guys are very you're very kind. And you're probably you're too kind. and your praise and thanks and all that kind of stuff is very much appreciated.
I was gonna say, if you thought
I'm
he was
by it, and you know, I'm just really thankful that so many, you know, like that it's so well received, and so many positive things has happened as a result of it, you know. So,
and I was gonna say, if you thought he was too kind, wait until you hear what I have to say. I was just gonna say,
I kind of get embarrassed by this kind of thing. You know?
Well, I at least want to say, like, I'll be honest, going into this, I wasn't sure what kind of conversation, what exactly we were going to be talking about. Like, of course, I've heard of you and I've obviously seen some of your stuff, but especially getting the opportunity to talk to you, hearing about just your experience as a whole and all that you've gone through and stuff, like, I feel for you, like, more than anything else. Like, I cannot tell you how disheartening that it could have seemed at times, but also like how inspiring it was for you. The fact that you've been through all of it, both good and bad, and you kept on going to do incredible stuff, whether it's and impacting people on so many different aspects. I guess I never really realized until now how much of an impact you've had on the industry as a whole, on the art community as a whole. And I want to just say thank you. Thank you for providing a good platform for people. And thank you for really inspiring, like I said in the intro, animators both now and for the future, because I think the industry is better off that you became a part of it. Sincerely, thank you.
Thank you. I want to say just a couple of things, guys. Don't neglect your health.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Don't neglect your family. Don't neglect other things that are important in life. You know, I mean, art is of course important. It's fun. It's great. It's not something that, and if you have the, you know, it should be something pursued if you want to pursue, but don't neglect other things. You know, you find a place in your life for other things that are important to you. Your relationships with people, other things, you know, whether it's like you want to raise a family or whether you want to, you know, like grow a garden or something like that, you know, like, you know, and just, you know, and there are times when you need to walk away from it. You need to just stop, take a break, duck, you know, go for a walk around the block, get your bike out, go riding. You know, they're just, it's not this life is all sorts of things. And life that's just one part of it. You know, so don't neglect these other areas of your life that can, you know, that can make life, you know, that can make it more fulfilling for you. And the other thing that I want to say to you is, you know, which I think is like, it's like one of the themes that I have. One theme that's like the thing that I use for my school. What's it called? You know, like, I don't know. It's one thing is just like keep creating, you know, that's the key. The key is keep creating, stay creatively productive, just keep moving forward. And if you're not drawing, write something, you know, and if, you know, maybe just, you know, like write a poem or a story or music or a nice letter to someone or a nice email that is kind of, you know, whatever, just keep creating. And also, never give up. Never give up. No matter what, no matter what, never give up. Never give up. Never give up. Just keep pounding away, man, you know, and you'll break through.
Honestly, that is wonderful.
And the next the project I'm doing now is that's the theme of it is never give up.
Oh, if
that pilot that I was talking about, you know, I'm kind of getting ready to kind of introduce that in a different kind of way.
Good.
But, you know, that's, and, you know, never give up. Just don't, especially if you are, like in my case, you know, I refuse to accept defeat at from the hands of unscrupulous people. If it takes me the rest of my life to, you know, overcome it, then so be it. Okay. I know it's extreme what I'm saying. I think it's like really pushing things, but it's just, I just feel that it's important, you know, it's important, and stay positive. You know, like the glass is half full, you know, be that kind of person. And, you know, just, you know, show your gratitude and, you know, show love for people, you know, learn to have like a genuine love for other people and respect, you know, for them. And the world, you will help to make the world a much better place. Okay. All right.
Absolutely. I was gonna say one last little thing. I just wanted to say, if people want to see the stuff you might be potentially showcasing in the future, go ahead and plug your stuff at people at home. Where can people find stuff more about you and the Animation Academy?
Well, the Animation Academy, I think it's going to go in a direction where I'm just going to have like kind of organized content for it. You know, I'm kind of winding down the teaching part.
Okay.
And I have a lot of projects that I've had on the back burner, and I'm developing this interesting technique, which I don't think is anything new. But I'm developing a technique which is kind of like, which I'm calling hybrid animation.
Okay.
My project is out there. I think I've just been trying to find the right venue for it. And what I've done now is I've found this really simple but effective video editing software, and it's called Clipchamp. And I don't know if you've heard about it or not, but it's a Windows based software, and
Okay.
it's something relatively new. And I found it by accident because I was, like I was being approached by people very recently, about a month and a half ago, who wanted to like see a pitch deck from me. And I don't know if you know what a pitch deck is, but it's something that I guess it's something that potential investors want to see. It's like a either a PowerPoint presentation or video presentation where you're explaining. It's like a formatted kind of thing. We're explaining, like what the issue is, what you're trying to achieve and stuff. And I just said, you know what, forget this, man. I'm not going to waste my time doing this stuff because you're all going to say, you're just going to say no, And
Yep.
so what happened was I did one on my own just to see how I would do it. And I wound up finding this video that I wound up finding Clipchamp. And it's pretty good. I mean, it doesn't do what Premiere does and stuff like that. It doesn't have like camera moves or anything, but it's good enough. And I started to kind of develop this cross between like a comic and a video, like a
Okay.
YouTube video. So I'm preparing this. I've just that's what I'm going to do as soon as we're done. I'm going to go back to work on it, and that's what I was doing prior to this interview. Was working on that, and I'm just getting all the different chapters together, and I'm putting them together for a YouTube like a YouTube cartoon series.
Okay.
And it's got it's got some. I'm finding music to put on. I'm finding little sound effects and stuff like that. And it's really the difference between like a graphic presentation, like a sequential, not sequential graphics, okay, and video is really it's really quite significant. And I'm playing, and I'm seeing that I can do this very quickly, and I can do it with all my projects. And I'm actually having some of my colleagues and my students. I'm trying to get them who like I know one person. She's in the Netherlands, and she's doing a project of hers that's taken her like 5 seconds of animation, took her like months to do,
Oh,
and I'm
wow.
going like, well, do like use this technique. And it's basically just using like cross dissolves, or crossfades from one pose to another. And it's working out. So
Okay.
that's going to be my next project. I'm going to be publishing it on YouTube probably this coming January.
Okay.
I'm going to be picking up on Procreate Dreams, trying that out, and seeing if that's something that I can utilize for this. So I'm just at a point where I just want to either wrap up some of the projects I've had on the back burner for a long time, and get back to this. There's a box right here in my studio, right here, that has a 2.5-minute animated film
Oh, wow.
that was used. It opened the producer show of Cal Arts in 1989. And I have one scene missing from it that I can easily replicate, but it's been sitting there for decades. I've been carrying this box around me wherever it is that I go, and it's like one example. It's a cute little thing. It's a fun little with fun characters in it. So I've got all this stuff lying around that I plan to get out now. So that's the direction I'm going in with my
Okay.
life.
Well, whenever you get that stuff prepared and you put it on that YouTube, let me know what that link is, because I definitely want to lead the people that way. Linked
Okay.
in the description below, because I definitely want people to see all this incredible stuff that you're talking about. I'm certainly excited for it more than anything else. So
It's
keep up
very
this.
unique. It's very unique in that the characters in it, the characters are from the 1980s.
Hmm.
And the drawings that you're looking at were actually from the 1980s. And the characters are aware that they're from the 1980s and that they're on something called the internet. So it's like it's inimitable in that in order to do something like this, you have to get into a time machine, go back 4 decades, okay, and like do the art and then come back and stuff. So it's like it's really unique because you're actually looking at stuff that's many years old, and the characters are aware of that. They're
Oh,
aware of
wow.
that. Okay, so
Okay.
and then it kind of goes from there. It's very I don't know, it's novel. It's I think there's a charm to it, but that's what I'm working on right now. So
Well, I'm
and
I'm sorry, you go on.
I was gonna say whenever it's when I'm ready, I'll absolutely let you know. Okay,
Please do.
so
Please do.
I hope that you guys like it. I don't really know, but I know I'm enjoying working on it. So that's a reward in itself.
Well,
So
good.
all right.
I mean, that'd be incredible. I'll be sure to link that and all sorts of other info about you in the description so that if people want to see more about your stuff, they will. With that, all I've got to say is for the people at home, pay your artists.
Yes, and I can follow up on what you just said, Nathan. Don't work for free.
Exactly.
Don't work for free. Absolutely do not work for free, because I could go into a lot of reasons why. I'm just saying, like, don't work for free. And if they're not paying you, don't do it. Yeah, I get calls all the time from people looking for artists. Oh, it's going to look good on your resume. Oh, this, all that kind of stuff. And just look, they're doing their own stuff, man. They're not, they're doing their own stuff. You need to pay these people, because I can't get them to work for you.
Yep.
If you're not paying them, I can go to a high school.
There you go.
And find somebody there. But you're not going to get somebody. They're just not going to do it. They're just
Exactly.
Going to do
So
it.
Once again, pay your artists. Don't do it for free.
You guys who have the money, pay your artists. You guys that are expecting to get paid, don't do it unless they pay you. Or work some sort of a deal out. Where you have some sort of equity. You have some sort of equity in what you do. So by the way, this is one of the ways that I get equity from projects. I may not get royalties, but I can hold on to the equity. The game Crash Bandicoot, Crash Nitro Kart, right?
Yes.
We did that in my school.
Okay.
In my school, and that was I could keep on going. I could tell you a lot more. But they did that in my school. I worked with Vicarious Visions, and we negotiated a contract for that. And you know what I got out of that contract?
What'd you get out of that?
The ownership to all the original artwork that we did.
Let's go.
Joe Pearson did, John Nevades, everybody else that was involved with it. Okay, I have a box with all the original artwork from Crash Nitro Kart that nobody has ever seen.
Good.
Okay, that's another one of my projects that I want to get to, where I can at least scan it and start showing it to people. But I own it. I own that. I own all the artwork from the original artwork from Jak and Daxter. I own all the original artwork that I did for Spyro. All that kind of stuff. And you think creatively. You can find ways to, make it work. But by all means, they're not going to get you. They're not going to get free artwork from you if you don't work for free. Okay, see, so the real control is in our hands. The real control is in your hands, folks. So all you got to do is just say, "I'm sorry, I do not work for free." That's all there is to it. I'll be happy to and try to get and this I do too. I get paid in advance, guys. I get paid in advance. I don't invoice after the work is done. I invoice before the work is done, and I get paid in advance. Okay, so try, and if you can't get paid in advance, then try to do something where you're getting half the money up front, and then or a third of the money up front, like a third, whatever, and also limit the amount of times that they can hit you up for revisions. There's a lot of things that you can do that can give you control and a lot less frustration and fatigue and burnout. So but it all starts with don't work for free, and I mean that. Don't work for. I will not work for people who offer to work for free for me. Mm-hmm. If I don't have the money or I don't have the resources to pay you in some sort of way, then I'm not gonna do it. I didn't do that with my project. I never did that with the academy. Any kind of project that we had that came into the academy that involved internships or anything like that, it was always paid.
Well, there you go.
Paid.
Okay. Well, there you go. Wonderful words to end on more than anything else.
Get your money. Thanks, everyone.
Tell me what's wrong, tell me sparks in motion. Sing me a song, tell me your eyes can all open. Show me it all, pick me up in the car you drove when you used to call. Show me it all.
Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. If this is your first time listening, I greatly do appreciate it. Seriously, after how long of an episode it was, I am genuinely surprised you've made it this far to the end. Now, Charles, if you're listening to this, thank you sincerely for your time and the conversation that we had and the insight you were willing to give. Truly one of the most enriching experiences I've had with a guest, to be able to go in depth with such a weird and unique career more than anything else. I know these are the kind of conversations I usually like crave. These are the kind of conversations that I want to go out of my way to try to find. Especially the more that we talked, realizing how many hands in some of the biggest properties that Charles kind of had a hand in one way or another. It's so weird and unique to know that this kind of person's out there that has been able to have so much experience and get to know so many incredible people that many of us love and recognize to this day. I mean, that's kind of part of the reason why I wanted to do episodes like this, why I want to talk to people like this. You know, it's one thing to love and appreciate the people that are always on the forefront when it comes to these art industries in one way or another. But getting to really dive deep and get to really learn the people that had a hand in some of this stuff, the people that you don't realize really helped shape and mold some of the stuff of entertainment that we hold near and dear today. It's something that always amazes me. Now, don't get me wrong, I was surprised with how much Charles had to talk about. Good Lord, Charles, I love you, buddy, but goodness, this was a conversation I did not anticipate whatsoever whenever I asked you to be on the podcast. But I am honored to have it, more than anything else. It is an honor, it is a blessing to say that I had a conversation like this with someone. And I will not take it for granted. It's episodes like this, the Joe Horn episode I had all the way back in episode 13. You know, people like that you don't realize really had a hand in some of the most creative outlets out there. And if nothing else, it really lights a fire for me to really try to help out with other people's creative outlets as best as I can. You know, I try as hard as I can to help out other indie productions if I can, whether it's just giving them a little bit of exposure at the bare minimum, paying for, you know, Kickstarters and something along the lines of that, or the biggest one that I've been doing these days, trying to help Tipsy get her Indiegogo off the ground for the Evil Little Thing. I know you guys have heard about me talk about this for weeks on end at this point, but I sincerely hope that you guys, if you can, please show some love and support for the Evil Little Thing. I mean, it's not just the fact that I write on it, it's the fact that I know that Tipsy has a lot of love behind it, and we really want to make this thing a reality, and we need your help if you can. If nothing else, if you guys are wondering what to get me for Christmas, that's it. Like, for the bare minimum of $5 for your name in the credits, just help us support the Evil Little Thing and help us get that to where it needs to be. Help us make that dream a reality, because we need all the help that we can get. At the end of the day, conversations like the one I had with Charles just more or less reminded me that you gotta love and appreciate the hard work that people put out there. Whether it be with all the character designing stuff, or whether it's the work he's done with the Animation Academy, I want to make sure to give that man his flowers. And I hope today's episode was a good testament of that. And I hope you guys are able to do that in your own lives, whether it's people that had a hand in some of the stuff that you love and cherish today, or some of the people that are creating some of the most unique and amazing art out there that you want to see a reality. Show that love and support, and make sure you let the people know, hey, we love what you're doing. We appreciate what you're doing. Please keep up the awesome work. Just like I'm always going to let you guys know that I love and appreciate all that you do, all the hard work that you put into your own personal projects. And I sincerely hope you guys keep going until your projects are to the fullest that they can be. Have a wonderful holidays.